It's a good one.
3.
You know, getting blind.
We're all set.
All
Thank you.
set?
Well,
Okay,
this
great.
doesn't help.
You ready? Let's go. Okay, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Orange Board of Finance. It's Monday, January 24th. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:05 PM. And start by having everyone introduce themselves, beginning on my right.
Kevin Moffett.
Kevin McNabola.
Terry Loomis, Amity Board of Education.
Jennifer Byers, Amity Board of Education.
Joe Nuzzo.
Jim Leahy.
Ajit Jain.
And Kevin Houlihan, thank you. Is there any public dialogue, Chris, Sean, or you just, nope, okay. Item number 4, Amity Budget Presentation for July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Dr. Byers and
All right.
Terry, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. You're the first out of the gate. Let's see. There we go. All right. So we're going to jump actually right into in the past when we've always started presenting the budget, we've always started with our board goals. But this year, we're actually pretty pleased that we are grounding ourselves in our portrait of the graduate. This has been about a 2-year process that we have worked with our community that includes our elementary parents, our elementary school districts, our students that are actually at Amity, members of the business community, members of the secondary education community, as well as our faculty of Amity in identifying and developing what our 3 towns conceive of as the way our students should exit Amity. What should be part of our portrait of the graduate. So while our board goals and our board mission continues to be very important, actually our budget is grounded in achieving the portrait of the graduate and essentially delivering upon the promise that we're making to the parents and to the citizens of the town, because this is what they say is the most important thing for students to leave with when they exit an Amity education. Amity, again, though, is still grounded in the 3 A's, and so we will just do a very quick overview of what an Amity budget and an Amity education is going to get you. The first being in the area of academics. You can see that we have a significant number of advanced placement sections. We offer early college experience, science research. We've had our National Merit Scholar semifinalists and commended scholars. Our pre-apprenticeship program is now up and running very strong, and we have, again, a high operation of student clubs and organizations, probably double since where we were last year when we were operating in our hybrid and COVID model. 98% 4-year graduation rate. The number of students who are going on to 4-year schools has been going down, and it's most impacted by the military work and gap year. That's hardly surprising for students who came off of a year and a half of COVID and hybrid education. Our graduating class last year was struggling a little bit to find their way, and so we had a much larger number of students who actually did not go on to secondary schools. Right now, currently in the class of 2022, so the one that's graduating, we have already had 72 early decisions submitted, 900 early actions, 100 students who've already reported admission to college, and our regular decision submission of college applications is approaching 2,000.
Jen, that 106,000 on the lower left there,
Yep.
I mean, that must be special awards like community awards rather than the college giving scholarships.
Correct. Those are all of our local
Oh, yeah,
scholarships
okay.
and awards that our students
Yeah,
receive.
that
Yep.
sounded a bit low.
Our state assessment performance, again, we consistently perform far above the state. We did all see a significant drop in the English language arts and the math scores last year as a result of students not actually being present for in-person learning. Our decline certainly is not something that we want to maintain. We are working very hard to improve in that area, but again, compared to the state of Connecticut, we are still significantly above the state averages. In the area of athletics, again, I can't belabor this point enough. In an era of COVID, when we didn't even get to run many of our championships, when some sports simply did not compete because we couldn't figure out a way to do that in a safe manner, our student athletes were still able to bring home a significant number of SCC championships and divisional championships. And our athletes were, again, highly recommended and commended amongst the area schools. Even as much as this fall, so the last season we just completed, we've had 24 SCC All-League athletes, 10 All-State athletes, and already one All-New England athlete. We have also been a Michael's Class Act recipient now for 6 years, having just been recognized for 2021. Essentially means that our student body is representing Amity as spectators in the way that we would hope and expect our students to show their Amity spirit and pride. In the area of the arts, again, we have lots of arts that we provide to our students, from our musical arts, which was, again, a program that was significantly truncated because you weren't exactly able to perform instruments in the way that you typically would have. But we have managed to sort of figure out ways around that, and by the time we came to our winter concerts for this school year, we are essentially functioning back in our normal fashion for our musical arts. Our visual arts, we had some incredible recognitions that were achieved during last year, including the second place Congressional Art Competition, where one of our students, Riley Palazzo, currently has her self-portrait seen here on the left on display in Congresswoman DeLauro's office in Washington, D.C. In performing arts, we were the winner of the best award, or the award for the best musical for the performance of Anastasia, which we were able to hold outside in our parking lot under a tent because we couldn't figure out any other way to do that during COVID. But we've also been able to successfully put on our middle school musicals. Moana in the fall at Bethany, Mary Poppins will be at Orange this spring, and then our annual play Puffs that we had in the fall with the high school creative theater. The budgeting process, we're sort of on level 3, where we have the superintendent's recommended budget. Again, this is pretty early in the budgeting process, so we still are working on numbers. We're still getting sort of adjustments to what we are anticipating for next school year. So you're seeing it at somewhat of its earliest stage. I just will cut right to the chase. The current budget is set at a 4.92% increase over last year's budget, and you can see the variance based on the towns. That is due to the changes in enrollment, and we'll kind of highlight those at the end of the presentation. Budget drivers, we have sort of 5 key areas where we are seeing our budget increase, and I'll sort of walk through each of these individually. So first of all, salaries and benefits, which are contractual, make up about 2/3 of the budget. It is the piece of the budget that we don't actually get to control because that is already built in terms of what those percent increases are. The other thing I will point out is the area of debt service is something that you will only see carried in the regional budget. So when you go to review the budget for, say, the Orange Board of Education, they will not show debt service because the town is carrying the debt service for the school district. Sort of a 10-year history, and I think this is, again, something that you've seen before. But when we look just at our contractual increases, you can see over the last 10 years, they pretty much hover right around sort of that 2.4, 2.5%. However, what we've been able to do for most of those 10 years is come in underneath those contractual increases. What that means is we have cut and reduced in other areas. And I've been saying this since I started presenting back in 2019. There is only so long you can do that before finally you are going to have to pay to make up for what we have been slicing and trimming for almost a decade now. And so you can see the 4.92% increase really does look out of place because we simply are at a breaking point in terms of being able to provide the Amity education that everyone has come to expect. Health insurance is a big topic for us right now. It's hardly surprising if you've been paying attention to our board meetings. Our claims right now are approaching 60% over the prior year plan. The claims from the prior year is what will drive our percent increases for the following year. So you can see that as of right now, at the midpoint of the 2022 fiscal year, we've already seen 10 claims and have hit the aggregate spend of $1 million. If we continue on that trend, we will be approaching about 20 claims with an estimated outlay of $2 million. So again, it's hardly surprising. We've seen extremely low claims in health insurance over the past couple of years. We knew that at some point, particularly with people kind of getting back into the swing of health care post-COVID, we expected to see a spike at some point. So as of right now, and this is again where I will say cautionarily, we are in the middle still of building the budget. Our current medical rate increase in the budget is 11%, and that's what is building the 4.92. We are still evaluating with our insurance company whether that needs to be increased to 14% based on our rolling 12-month estimate. If we start to approach those 20 claims and that $2 million aggregate, we may be looking at 20%, or do we sort of hedge our bets and take a moderate approach and land somewhere in the middle around 17? So this is one of the moving parts. In the past, I know that I have come before our finance boards, and by the time April rolls around, for at least the last 3 years, we've seen that percent increase go down. I have absolutely no reason to expect that the 11% is going down. I am cautioning this board that it may actually be going up as we get closer to when we have to finalize the budget.
Could you go back to the prior slide? Terry, if I may direct this question to you. That first statement there, claims approaching 60% over, doesn't at all feel like what I see from you and Dr. Barriers on a monthly basis when we get our monthly Word document. That at least in my prior, I think Jack Levine, your predecessor, used to create. And it is under 100% the claims compared to its budget. So if you could just shed any light you can on how that could be true and have that statement up there, that would be beneficial to me.
Sure. So first of all, we're at 105% as of the January meeting, so we are over 100%
Okay, thank
in our
you.
forecast. And that statement is on an annualized basis. If we continue on the track that we saw in November and December, which was our two highest months, that the estimate for the year would be 60% over. We're not saying that right now we are. We're saying that if November and December claims, I think, I can't remember if it was November, December, they were over $700,000 in 1 month. So if we were to continue on that track, we would be 60% over.
So when I go back and look at the Word document for the month of December that just came out, let's just say, in early January, I'll find that 700,000 number, is that what you're saying?
Yes, in the chart.
And then you rolled that estimate more or less as if it was going to happen for the rest of the year?
So actually, I worked with our insurance consultant, and he provided that information.
You know, I'm trying to,
That 60% estimate came directly from our insurance consultant.
It's based on like a 2-month trend, basically. Sounds like, yeah.
Yes.
okay, I track
And
these
given what
every
we
month.
know
Kevin, okay?
about our pending long-term leave, we
Yeah.
have no reason to believe that the trend is going downwards. So people who have to take long-term leave will often request that well in advance. It obviously helps us prepare substitutes. We know they're taking leave for the purposes of some medical care, and so we do not see that trend changing downward at this point.
The monthly claims is what we're talking about.
Well, no, you're talking about the annualized 60% over the prior plan.
Being 5% a month over every month. 12 times 5 means 60, that what you're saying? 5%, I guess is what you're saying?
Well,
No,
they're,
necessarily.
November and December were significantly over budget. And what the insurance consultant has looked at and reviewed with me is that not only that the claims are over, it's those particular cases, the threshold they're at, the likelihood they are to continue to develop claims. Those people who are at 50,000, will they hit that 150 or not? So that's the analysis that all goes into that estimate. It's not just 2 months of claims, but it's those specific claimants and where they are in track in their medical care.
So 150 is the stop loss?
Yes.
Is that when, from a budget perspective, you get into some form of danger zone?
Well, we only have so much in the reserve to cover the overage, so.
So.
And
so
the
if-
reserve, remember, was something we reduced
No,
last
we'll
year
get
to
the
bring
re-
our
We'll get to the
budget
reserve in
down.
a minute. I'd like to kind of one at a time. All right, I look forward to re-looking at the data, because my memory of the data was that it was over 100% and came back down under 100% claims for the year at that point in time. And maybe I missed the last month, okay, where apparently we had a big spike. But educate me on this. I've never really tracked it, honestly, I haven't. I understood. This stop loss thing of what, 150? That's a bad thing from a budget perspective in the sense of what? What happens after you get over 150?
So, two things. One, after you get over 150, the insurance company so right now Anthem is our carrier, and
Right.
Anthem also has the stop loss policy.
Right.
They would pick up the claims after 150.
Right.
However, that affects your projection for the next year, what you think your claims are gonna be. Are these people, in a medical
So in that particular
situation?
year, you're still good. In other words, the insurance doing its job on covering stuff, but then they go look back and say, hey, last year you had a gym, and gym was a problem, man, so your overall claims rate will necessarily have to go
For
up.
the
Is that
stop-
how it works?
For the stop loss rate and the fees for that,
Yeah.
that will be driven up by the number of claims you have and how high they go over.
Okay.
Your overall trend of how many people hit that stop loss
Yes.
also factors into things.
So that
So we may
individual
plan
number of
normally
claims
in a
over
year
50
that
or
we have 8 to
150.
10 people hit
Yeah.
a claim, but if you end up with much more than that,
Right.
that's going to factor into it
Okay,
too.
I don't need a
Yep.
full tutorial, but I surely appreciate the answer to that question. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Jim makes a good point. Insurance companies, though, typically take a 12-month or 24-month trend analysis when they do these. Where I think they're kind of sounding the alarm a little bit here, and it might be a little bit too early, I'm not sure, is they're taking 2 months of trend data based on large claimants. And I guess they've done some analysis to determine that those large claimants are probably sustainable over several months or years, depending on what the condition of those.
Yeah, but Anthem is also a business.
Exactly. That's
Someone
where I'm
could
getting
also
at.
see this as
That's
teeing
why-
up a rationale for an increase that may or may
Right.
not be justified.
That's why I would rather look at a 12-month trend or a 24-month trend than just a 6-month trend.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, okay.
So we are basing it on a rolling 12-month trend, and the Anthem is not the one who is making this projection. This is our independent insurance consultant who is going to get the data directly from Anthem. They do their own analysis. Anthem will do an analysis and
Yep.
will deal with us on our renewal. But we have an independent person who's kind of overseeing that and being the go-between with us, so we're not solely relying on Anthem's word as to what it should be.
And who is that independent?
USI?
USI, okay.
Yeah. Well, we've had people in the business telling us we should have 30% reserves.
Right.
And we have had a person come and educate us, Kevin and I for sure, and I don't know if you were there, Kevin, but PJ certainly was, friend of PJ's. And he says you don't need anything over 15. That's crazy. And they're doing a lot of towns in the state of Connecticut. So there's a large variability across, quote, professionals, right, who have an opinion on all this stuff. Stop, how much reserve you need, when this is going to kick in, how much of it should kick in. There's very high variability here. Thank you.
All right. So moving on, pupil services, or what is more in layman's terms known as our special education services, continues to always have some major fiscal impacts. We have a rising outplacement coming to us from one of our elementary districts. So the $195,000 will come off of their books and goes onto our books to provide the student with the instruction that we are legally required to provide them, that they actually need to be successful.
Is this a student that came in from grade 6?
Yes, that's a rising outplacement. So they're coming up from grade 6 from one of the elementary districts.
So was that, I don't know how to ask this question, was that from Orange?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
We have a residential placement that we are adding that was unanticipated. That was somebody who was placed on new this year. RBT is a type of behavioral therapy. So we have a student who is coming who requires that behavioral therapy. And then we have increased legal costs. Many of these are due to some of the learning loss that was associated with COVID over the past year. So altogether, just in terms of new students or unanticipated students, we have an additional $500,000 in our pupil services. However, I will say pupil services is one of the places where we have seen the most cost savings initiatives. So we have added over the course of several years our sales program. It costs the operating budget $281,000 to operate sales. If we sent those students to an out-of-district placement and provided them with transportation, it would cost about $800,000. We have our Amity Transition Academy, which is for our 18 to 22-year-old students. In the operating budget, it runs about $270,000. If those students had to be provided with an out-of-district placement and transportation, it would be close to $500,000. And this year is our first year of our Spartan Prep Academy, which is for our emotionally disturbed students at the middle school. It costs in the operating budget about $135,000. If those students had to go into an out-of-district placement, it would be again close to $500,000. So I know that there is oftentimes a criticism that despite our declining enrollment, we have added staff. Most of the staff that we have added have been the special education teachers, the paraeducators, the RBTs, and the job coaches that run these programs that ultimately save money in the budget because we do not have to have an out-of-district placement. And this year, we are adding a new program.
Could we go back to that other slide? I think we can get to that. As a matter of fact, you can go back to the slide before that, if you would. How is the determination made? Is it black and white when you decide that you're going to an outplacement for a student?
No, it goes through a legal planning and placement team process.
And the residential placement?
Again, it's through the planning and placement team process. So we are obligated to provide by law students the least restrictive environment and the most appropriate education. And in some cases, we can do that within Amity. As a matter of fact, we try very hard to do that within Amity because we think that's the right thing to do for kids.
Right.
But if we are unable to provide those services because their needs are so significant, then the most appropriate educational placement is out of district, and that goes through the individualized education plan and through the planning and placement team
Can I
process.
ask you this question? Since these are increases that it seems to be coming into grade 7, right? Or
Not
a person
necessarily all of them. Somebody could just move into the
moving to
town.
the district, yeah. The reason I feel like there's some variability here is this, and maybe you can just do a quick education, and maybe I need a tutorial. I have for a long time heard that people come to Orange, and Woodbridge, Bethany perhaps as well, from areas maybe, well, from elsewhere, because we, quote, have a better special education program than wherever they were at. In other words, just moving in, and, you know, we can talk about, you know, thoughts on that, but that leads me to think that there's significant variability in how situations are handled from town to town. Could you comment on that?
Sure. This is the reason why they move here. And because we operate those programs in district, and many parents would prefer that their children attend a program in the town
Right.
and with the peers in
Sure.
which they live.
Yeah.
Other districts who do opt for either an out-of-district placement are not always seen as favorable by families because they don't want their student riding a bus for an hour and 15 minutes to go to a program that's outside of Hartford somewhere. So this is probably the reason why people believe that we run a very strong special education program, but every single one of these students comes with a different set of disabilities, and some of them we just do not have the programming that we can provide for them in district.
Okay. Thank you.
So to continue, we added Spartan Prep this year. It's for grades 7 and 8, which means, of course, eventually you need Spartan Prep for grades 9 through 12. And at this point, given the significant mental health needs that we're seeing in our children as a result of 2 years of no socialization, we know we need our program for our emotionally disturbed students at the high school to begin next year. In order to provide this program, we will need to have an additional special education teacher as well as a mental health clinician. That's typically a school psychologist or a social worker. A very small fraction of an administrative assistant just to deal with the incoming paperwork that's associated with our new students. In the operating budget, the cost of this program is $188,000. The cost of what we would estimate is 3 out-of-district placements, but we actually think at this point we have 4 potential students for this program. So that number at the bottom would go up. But depending on the programs they go into, it would be somewhere between $365,000 to $500,000, and that's not including that 4th student. So I will be very blunt. If this is not included in the budget, then our budget will have to go up by $365,000 to another $561,000 because we have to provide the education to these students. The choice is, do we provide it in Amity by creating a new program, which requires new staff, or do we send the students to out-of-district placements? And again, I firmly believe that if we are providing for our children here, we do the best we can and we give them programming in the school with their peers and with their, within their hometowns. That's what I think is the right thing to do.
So if these students, they have health insurance?
They
the mental
could,
health
they
clinician will be submitting claims for these students?
No. We are obligated, under federal law, we provide this. It is not something that's covered by health insurance. Technology, I think it's well known that COVID again drove us to be a one-to-one environment faster than we intended to be. So we do have our ongoing devices, the lease payments for the existing devices, as well as the new ones that we have to add as the old ones kind of burn out. Comes with endpoint and peripherals. We also do have some specialized lab replacements that we use for visual performing arts and visual arts really, and CTE. The software for teaching in a one-to-one environment and Promethean boards, or what's called a smart board. We purchased almost all of those at the same time, and so they are all dying kind of a natural death. However, what we are finding is that the availability of some of the processors and the supply chain issues has resulted in a cost of the smart boards doubling from when we purchased them last year. I just mentioned this because textbooks has been an area where we have been able to often make reductions, and then we were able to lower the budget in this area. Our textbooks actually are decreasing from last year, or from this current school year, so textbooks is not actually a place where we would be able to make further reductions to help lower the budget. So personnel fiscal impact, I've already addressed the top 3 because that's part of the Spartan Prep program that we are proposing for the high school. So I would like to address the bottom 5 positions that we have here. So one position that we are looking for is an information security support technician, specifically focusing on cybersecurity. We are finding that we are unable to renew our cybersecurity insurance without having a dedicated individual who is just dealing with cybersecurity attacks against the district. We have had at least 2 or 3 cybersecurity attacks in the past year and a half. The insurance has covered a significant cost of what it would have required for us to essentially rebuild our servers, and it is not something that we want to lose because, again, I think it would be a much higher cost to the district if we did that. So we are looking, but in order to renew it, we really need to have a personnel dedicated to that. I can't say that it should be surprising to anyone that over the course of the years of adding hundreds of security cameras, literally close to 3,000 one-to-one devices, all the individualized labs, at some point we have to increase our technology staff. And we've been operating on a pretty lean technology staff to begin with. The second position that we have is our school security officer. So you may remember that about 2 years ago, we added our Sally ports, which are locked vestibules, so it forms a double point of entry so that nobody can actually get into the school without literally having shown their ID and being checked in by security personnel. When we added those vestibules, we added one guard at each middle school because we knew we needed one person in the vestibule and we needed one person still walking through the hallways. However, we didn't add an additional guard to the high school, so it meant that the 3 guards that we used to have roaming our hallways were reduced to 2 so that one person could be in the vestibule. We are finding that, and again, if you've listened to the news, the rate of youth making poor decisions increased a lot after COVID, and we are seeing that happen in our schools. And we are finding that we really have a need at this point of having those 3 security guards operating in our hallways while we have the one person manning the vestibule to keep unwanted visitors from entering the building. Then we have the proposal of the middle school media teacher, media being more CTE along the lines of digital media and video media. So this is essentially one full-time equivalent at each of the middle schools. It is designed to enhance the elective program of a comprehensive middle school. It would run opposite our band, chorus, and Mandarin classes to offer additional exploratory learning experiences for our students. We offer general music as part of our regular rounds instruction, so all of our students experience general music. And what we are finding that's happened is that if you are not a student who has a proclivity for Mandarin or band or choir, they are being forced into classes that they don't want to participate in, or they are ending up in a study hall due to a lack of an elective. So currently we have 131 students that are across the 2 middle schools that are just in a study hall and not getting any class at all. We probably have an equal number of students who would rather not be in band, chorus, or Mandarin, but have to because there is no other choice. So the CTE elective would provide an opportunity for those students to study an introductory CTE course that essentially feeds to the courses that are provided at the high school in the areas of digital and video media. This is just a description of what they would teach. You can read that later.
Did I miss the CTE acronym?
Career and Technical Education.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the last personnel fiscal impact is a diversity, equity, and inclusion instructional coach. This individual would be responsible for planning and delivering the professional learning for certified and non-certified staff in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They would provide hands-on coaching to teachers to promote best practices in diversity and equity and inclusion. We have started curriculum equity audits in social studies and English. This has to continue into all of our content areas. So this individual would be responsible for assisting and then ultimately leading those curriculum equity audits in those areas. They would support the Spartan seminar and advisory faculty in the development of student lessons, specifically around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They would be able to collaborate for any special programs that the students are working on. For example, programs in February related to Black History Month. They would also help in the collection of the data that's related to DEI, and they would co-facilitate the district DEI committee. This position is actually a .5 position because the other half of the position was already identified in the ARP-ESSER grants. So it came through in federal funding, and we intentionally targeted it to be implemented next school year because we knew we needed this school year to actually train and identify who that individual was going to be.
What would be a curriculum equity audit?
So for example, right now, I'll say our English department is going through a curriculum equity audit. So we are looking at the types of texts and resources that we use to make sure that it's going to be representative of different races, different genders, different gender identities, that it reflects people who can have disabilities, so that it's not simply texts and materials that are reflective of only the majoritized population, but also reflects our minority populations.
So, another three-letter acronym. It sounds like education has gotten on to the same industry. You used to have buzzwords, three-letter acronyms that were going to save the world in terms of quality circles, QWT. Now we have a few sprinkled in here. How does this relate to another one that I've heard a little bit about, CRT?
Well, CRT is a curriculum that is not appropriate nor taught in the K through 12 level, so it's not related to it at all.
It's not related to it at all.
No.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not related to CRT.
Correct.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you.
What happens next year when there's not ARP funds?
So then it would go from 0.5 to 1.0. So rather than, again, sort of hitting the budget really hard with an entire additional one personnel, we tried to spread the ARP funding out so that it could be absorbed slowly.
So these curriculum equity audit, these are state mandated?
No, this is not state mandated. It's part of our efforts to make sure that all of the students who attend Amity feel that they're represented and that they have a connection to the curriculum that we're teaching them.
Where did this come from?
A DEI instructional coach?
No, DEI is an anything, as a concept.
Like, if it's not mandated,
Well,
do you have like 100 students complaining about the curriculum?
No, I think what we've always believed in is that every student who comes to us should have a relationship and an understanding and see themselves represented in what they're learning. Part of your responsibility as a teacher is that you need to be able to reach and meet the students where they're at. And their identity and their how they associate and view themselves is where the students are at. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that every student who walks through that door feels that they are part and welcome in our community, and that the other students around them are welcoming to them and make them part of our community.
Does that
And this isn't like new, this is kind of good school culture that we want to focus on.
Yeah, but I used to do that teaching by dint of showing up to teach.
Well, I think the curriculum is much broader now, and we have so much more to choose from because we're operating much more of a global society with things at the tips of our fingers.
Well, I taught math, right? Math is math, right?
Well, we would look at diversity, equity, inclusion, even with respect to math.
Uh-huh.
So how was this decided? Like a committee was formed, it was like, how did you guys decide to include this?
So this is again well, I guess this would come through school climate surveys. So every year, this is sort of the mandated part, I guess. Every year, school districts are mandated to issue school climate surveys to students, parents, and teachers. And so it was through our school climate surveys, we can see that there are populations of our minoritized students that do not feel that they are represented in what we teach and in the resources that we provide to them.
They're mandated by where?
The school climate surveys,
Yeah.
state statute.
State statute of Department of Education?
Yes. Well, no, but the state statute of the state legislature, right? That's what statute is. It's in the legislature.
Right. All right, so we'd have to go back to find out how it got, who provided the impetus to have that be a mandate.
I think the school climate surveys came as a result of significant concerns over bullying. So you can find when they instituted the bullying statutes and the required bullying policies, that is also when school climate surveys came on board.
It's like probably like early 2000s.
I'd say, I think 2012 is where the date sort of sticks in my head.
Okay, so bullying caused the need to have surveys. And surveys now are servicing DEI.
So with surveys, like what percentage of respondents complained about equity?
I'm sorry, I don't have the survey data available to me right now. And so I can certainly try to do that. They don't quite use the term equity because I don't think our students understand what that is. But it's questions like, I feel that people in this school district treat others with respect. I feel that that I've been made fun of because of the way that I look or because of the color of my skin.
Are these
So-
the same surveys, questions from district to district?
There are 6 mandated questions that have to be on every school climate survey.
And across the DIRG, is there sharing of information of this, or how do you know when you're doing well?
So, well, I think actually to know when you're doing well, you need a much more pinpoint survey that disaggregates the data based on some of the minoritized populations, which is exactly what we will begin conducting in February of this school year.
I think you're right. I think that times have changed since I was teaching math in what would be in Orange 7th grade. I don't know if it's been for the better. And we better just leave that topic alone. Yeah, to be continued.
All right, move on to capital improvement. So this is just a quick overview of some of the items that we are addressing for next year. This is what would, some of them would be in the operating budget. The water lines replacement, courtyard repair in the middle school up in Bethany, the window film as part of school security. We always have the concrete and asphalt repair on. We've identified, we're anticipating we will have money left from the bonding, and so bond money has to be used for similar projects. So we will do our chiller refurbishing and then the culvert clean out at the high school athletic fields with the bond surplus. Kindly, the Board of Education appropriated 1% for our CNR account, and we will use that for remodeling our lecture hall, which hasn't been updated since 1996 when the building was renovated, as well as doing some work with our records room so that we have more space. And then we are anticipating a reimbursement security grant, which will allow us to purchase more security cameras.
That lecture hall, if you,
Yeah.
how big is it?
It's probably about the size of this area, and it's
What's it used for?
nothing right now because it's in such disrepair.
What might it be used for?
So it would be used for if you combine 2 classes together and you wanted to do like a larger group
Right.
lecture, but you needed the space to fit them. We would like to actually convert that and use that for some of our Board of Education meetings because it's a much more conducive atmosphere for putting up the technology. It can be used for professional learning for our faculty and staff when we have our professional learning days, because again, it accommodates probably about 60 people maybe.
Okay.
So-
You give me a good feel. Thank you.
5-year projects just kind of on the radar for us. The patio, if you ever go to the high school, there's a big patio right in front of the school, and it's just cracked and falling apart. It just needs to be repaired. It's concrete, and it just needs some attention. We know we need to do some corridor flooring replacement. We have to update the gas lines in some of our science labs. A couple upgrades to our athletic facilities, including knowing that we have sort of a 10-year period in which we have to plan for the all-weather field replacement. And then we continue to sort of pass on the musical instruments. This is the 4th year. Those have been on the budget requests. At some point, our kids just aren't going to have musical instruments to play on anymore. So we would look for that.
We provide them?
More unusual ones, so like tubas, timpanis, some of the more complex percussion instruments are provided by the school, yes.
Wow.
And then just looking at continuing some of our roofing projects that we have in place so that we do not have to go out to bond for any roofing repairs. Debt service, you can see that it is going up, but not significantly because of the very good interest that we got on the most recent bond project for the HVAC and for the athletic facilities. And then it also starts to fall off significantly in the 2025 fiscal year. The 2% reserve, again, this will just be part of the budget that regional school districts are able to appropriate up to 2% of the current fiscal year, if there's any left over, to the capital and non-recurring funds. This was available to us this past year, but the Board of Ed appropriated 1%, but we just have this statement in our budget packet just as a advisement that up to 2% can be appropriated for CNR expenses. So initially, the budget requests were at 7.16. We were able to go through several meetings to get those requests dropped down to 5.4, and then ultimately the 4.92 that you see here. Average daily membership, again, this is where you see the impact of declining enrollment and how it favorably impacts Bethany and unfavorably impacts Orange and Woodbridge because you did not decline as much as Bethany declined. And then that brings us to the town allocations of where we currently have those. We did return funds. I think I just actually signed those purchase orders last week back to the towns from fiscal year 21. And that is the amount that is being returned. I know that Amity is often criticized that returning funds is evidence of bad budgeting. I will say that returning funds is evidence of operating a school district in a hybrid mode where you had literally half of the students there for an entire school year. So the budgeting that we did for things like field trips and athletic teams that never actually happened, supplies that we were not able to purchase because students weren't able to do the things in person and hands-on the way that they normally would, the 15% that we reserved for COVID expenses that we didn't know we were going to get reimbursed by the federal government for once we finally spent them. All of those go into the impact that COVID had on running our operating budget last year.
Could I go
Finance
back-
presentations, like I said, you guys are the first.
Could I go back to this, and probably it's a better question for Terry. Terry, as I just quickly eyeball these numbers on the right, it feels to me that that probably is 2.8, maybe 2.9 if I added those three. I'm not even trying to get grenade close. But in addition to that, would have been the 500 plus thousand,
1%.
right? The
Yep.
1% thing.
Correct.
All right, so I think the numbers I have for the surplus in that year might be understated, unless I have the wrong year that I'm thinking about. So if I show slides that show a number that's different from this, I need to kind of reconcile that with you at some point, okay?
It's in the monthly forecast every year, the history, and it shows exactly how much was left. So when we look, we have a history of the last 3 fiscal years, so there's a history of fiscal year 21, and it will
In
show
the Word document or the Excel
the
document?
Word document.
The Word document, in the back? Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so finance presentations, like I said, you are the first, and that is the end.
Could you go back to that one? I see that you're at Woodbridge and then
on right.
Bethany.
Back to
Yes.
back.
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right.
Joe, can you help me with this?
Thank you.
Good.
So you guys are really having a meeting on Valentine's night?
Well,
It's because I love the board so much that we're going to spend Valentine's Day together. Exactly.
Yeah. Very good, perfect.
I have a number of slides I've prepared. But I know that everybody's got questions, right? They're individual questions. So I don't want to just go through slides and ideas that I have done. So, how about I go through a couple, Kevin, and then
Sure.
get things started, and then I can always share with you these slides after that. I have some questions. And these slides will be made available for anybody who wishes. John, I'll get them to you, and Paul can put them up on the town website, okay? And we can do the same with Dr. Byers' presentation as well. That's fine. These are the people that are on the Amity Board of Education, and I'm mentioning this like as if there's people watching on OGAT and might not know. There are 7 people, there are 13 members of the Amity Board of Education. 7 are from Orange, 6 are from the other 2 towns, 4 from Woodbridge, and 2 from Bethany. The names of the people are up there. All of them are on the left. On the right-hand side is Joe is our representative. There is a finance committee, the Amity Finance Committee, which is a combination, for those who don't know, everybody at this table obviously does, but for people in the town, that was created back in about the year 2000. Terry, were you here then?
I was-
No. And that's when there was a shortfall of $2 million suddenly. And Kevin or anybody remembers.
We were all
And
here.
and there was
Oh,
a
yeah.
budget referendum that got defeated 18 times. I think 18 was the right number, Kevin?
Yep.
As a result of the fact that all of a sudden there was a $2 billion bill, and let's just say Orange had to pick up half of it, so it was roughly about $1 million, and people were not happy. The Amity Finance Committee was born from that process. Is that a fair summary, Kev?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was put in by the state.
So that's why it is, and so therefore, it's had various things. I was on the Amity Finance Committee from 2005 to 2009. Joe's picked it up since then. And I just wanted everybody to know, 13 members, 7 are from Orange. There's their names. If you want to contact them, there they are. And there is a thing called the Amity Finance Committee as well. Not to belabor what Dr. Byers has given a fine presentation on. The increase in spending, as you mentioned, 4.92%. Didn't get a lot of play in that presentation, but I think it's common. I don't know if it's 68 or 66, but there's a significant number of fewer students. It's in the document that we received. And as Dr. Byers pointed out, there is a request for 7.2 FTEs in addition. If you look on the right, the different areas where, in the boxes there, where you have the Amity AMS middle school, Bethany AMSO is a middle school, Orange is and then you have the high school, pupil services, central administration, and that's where the increases are, and those numbers directionally seem consistent, I think, fair, right? It's math, right? So of what Dr. Byers said about a lot of things being driven by special education. We do see that medical and dental is up by a certain number. If I copied it right, that's it. OPEP is been revisited to be funded at that rate there. That's in the budget document as well. And the impact on the towns is actually higher. That's probably because we're getting less money from elsewhere. We can get into those details. But the impact to the towns is even higher than the $2.5 million that we see up at the top there. It's $2.7 million or 5.44%, and the impact to Orange, as Dr. Byers has mentioned, is 6.27%, which is about $1,581,917. What isn't here, and what I'm going to present quickly, is the following. What is the impact of this budget? What does it mean? What's the impact of a budget like this to taxpayers? Because that's what they're interested in. One of the graphs we show every year is the difference between a 1% per year over a 10-year period of spending and 4% per year. And we talk about the magic of the eighth wonder of the world, I think we call it, right, Kev? Right, compound interest. Well, now we have a new one, and I just hastily throw it together to see what the number was. So if you did have an increase of 6.27 per year, which is the impact to Orange from this budget, you would be at 183.70 after 10 years. It's just the math, okay? To keep myself straight and also to direct what sections I have here, and I'll only go through the first one, Kevin, then I'll open it up to others, right? But I have a lot of questions. And the first one is I've got things about the rate of impact. What's that mean? I quantified that. I'll show it to you. I did research on Amity Contracts, the teachers, the admins, and various others. I have questions there as well. I have a number of slides on Amity historical data, which I'll share with you. We shared them a year ago, and I think the more everyone in town is aware of the data, the better off everybody is to have a dialogue about it. I also want to talk about the Amity budget surplus directly and the monthly update data over the last 5 years. There's some interesting information there. There's a forecast. We've talked about, I wrote an article that was in the paper recently. It was in the Orange paper. It might have been in the Woodbridge paper as well. I have some questions about Amity Medical and Dental. We have the students thing. We've pretty much covered that. And the path forward, what's the budget steps going forward? I'd like us to leave here today knowing what roughly we're talking about, and also voting dates. It wasn't clear to me in this document. If I read it here, it must have been in there, about the voting dates, and it was a district hearing and voting dates, and someone's going to decide whether or not we're going to have a referendum. That was very unclear to me. So at some point, I think we need to get into that. So this is what I would like to share with you, that when we have, in a sense, from the Orange Board of Finance, from my point of view, we have kind of like Amity, Orange Board of Education, and the town, right? And we have a little bit of capital, right? The debt service. Or the debt service is actually in the town, but the capital account. And while they're not exactly a third, they're kind of roughly a third. But if everybody was to bring in 6.27%, which is what this budget is, here's the impact. What you have here is an average retail home in the yellow, $355,000. The average assessment is 70%, and they pay taxes now about $8,274. It's all done in Excel, so we'll blame Excel if there's a problem. The Amity proposed spending, the rate of its impact to this town, to these taxpayers, all right, is 6.27% as currently presented. And we've already heard that it's early in the process and we're still massaging it, and we know historically we go through these 2-month period or 6-week period and we find whatever efficiencies or gains or choices that we can make in order to see what we can do about a budget. But right now, that's where we are. So what that would mean is that the new property tax with if you had this Amity rate of return in all of our areas, right? So it's an assumption about the overall, applying it across the board. All right, you could say, well, maybe whatever. Then the increase would be over $500, all right? That's what it would mean. And if your house wasn't in the 355.5, if you were lower, it would be lower, but I quickly threw it together, and maybe it was unfair. Maybe I should have put some on the lower end. That was an improvement I could have made. But you can see that that number in red there goes up from 519 to 584 to 730 to 876. So while everything in the world is good and just, that's the data, okay? That's the impact. And I wanted to share that. I quizzed myself on what it meant. when you get the file, if you get it in Excel, this is an embedded thing, so you can just punch the number in, put some number other than 6.27% right in that middle box, all right, and it'll translate all the different numbers, okay? All right, so when you get that, you can do that. Okay, so I'll open it, rather than dominate this thing, Kev, I'll open it up for questions. I have a lot of them, but I don't think I have to go through all of mine at first, right?
Oh, we can proceed however anyone likes, if anyone has any questions, or we just go with yours and piggyback on any of that. You know, my concern always is if at 6.27, obviously, we're not gonna raise taxes to the town at that rate, so we'd have to hurt the Orange Board of Ed and the town to mitigate that size of an increase on the third of the budget.
Which we do every year anyway,
Yeah, we do.
because of that.
I'll wait for your questions, Jim, but I do have, you know, I have one that goes back to when Dr. Brady was sitting where Dr. Byers was in 2008. And he needed a 10th guidance counselor. I remember it, 2008, we were in rough shape, and I asked him to wait. And, you know, he said what he said and added the position. Just because we're adding FTEs, I think there has to be areas where we can lower FTEs, and that might be one of them, because just in the last 2 years, we've lost 113 students. I don't know what the drop was from 2008 to 2022, but I think we were probably in the 2,500 range back then.
Oh, we got the data, I got the
Okay,
chart here.
so that's just like,
You're right.
I have things,
Your
I have
memory is
questions like
good.
that where, you know, that person, and I looked at this earlier and I checked just now to make sure my brain's not warped and that 10th person's still there.
Correct.
So I'm, you know, and I know there's more emotional or stress in with everything else, but I think we're probably down 250 to 300 students. So that would be a department I would look at. But then I'll digress to everyone else on the board or Jim to continue with his questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Houlihan, did you actually have a question, or was that just an
No, it's a
observation?
statement.
Okay, I was just making sure I
That
didn't
the
miss
person's still
anything.
there and they've been there
Okay.
for 13 years and the student population has, you know, significantly declined.
And normally when enrollment goes down, there are budget cuts. And here, we are doing the reverse.
So, well, I think painting somebody as an FTE is a very inaccurate way of portraying that. Because, for example, we added, we talked about it just now, we added 2 school security officers 2 years ago. Those are 2 FTEs who do not provide instruction to students in the classroom. They provide additional security to our buildings. We added additional technology specialists who do not provide instruction to our students. They take care of the computers that our students are using, and when we add 3,000 computers to our school population, I need somebody taking care of those. So the simplistic portrayal of just saying this many kids and this many FTEs doesn't necessarily translate to instructional.
I agree with you, but
provision.
I was targeting that one specific guidance department. Because I remember when he was sitting in that chair and he
Well,
had to have that
regretfully,
person.
there's been Dr. Brady and Dr. Dumais and other superintendents in between. I cannot answer
Yeah.
to that one specific guidance counselor chair.
No, but there is a correlation. IT you need, special ed's grown, I get that. The students have gone down. It would be like if I had another staff accountant with me and I lost, 200 clients, I don't need this person anymore. Why are they still there? That's my point.
And to add to that, like in principle, like enrollment going down, there should not be a budget increase. I understand there may not be a budget cut. And then we are still in the middle of the pandemic, still, trying to come out of the pandemic. So some of the initiatives that have been proposed, I understand they are good initiatives, but they can be put on hold for some time, until things get back to normal.
Well, and ultimately, that's where the Board of Education would help provide the direction and support for the budget as I see it. So I will make sure that, and I know I have some Board of Education members here, so that they will understand that perhaps putting initiatives on hold is a recommendation that comes from this Board of Finance.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't I go through a couple more sections, Kevin, because you were touching on something, and I think I can shed some light and other people can make decisions. I spent a fair amount of Saturday in the morning, and I sent an email to all of you with these contracts, the teacher's contract, the administrative contract, and various other contracts. And again, this presentation is to assist everyone in town. And so I put a couple of slides in that will look like that. The Amity Contracts, if you go up on the Amity website, thank you, John, by the way, for finding these sites for me. Under district information, there are bargaining unit agreements, and you can see where they are right there. Okay, so this is just a guide to encourage others. If you want to see what the contracts are, there they are. I do have a question about the teacher's contract, so I'll direct that to Terry and Jen. But first of all, what's the data, right? Well, that's the data. That's the data for next year for STEPs, BA, MA, 6th year, PhD. What does 6th year mean?
So they have a master's degree, and then they would have an additional 30 credit hours.
Oh, so it's the old
graduate.
master's plus 30?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then they were transitioning over, I think, from looking at the contract from where you had like 1 and 1.1, 1.5, and it looked complex. So there was a previous. So what does a step mean? How many years? So if you're at step 13, you've been 18 years or more. Okay, so you can see what that is there. You can see what the sick leave is. It's in the contract, 15 days for sick leave. It accumulates. And again, if you were before 2004, there's a lot of more details, personal days, and I called it family pass because I didn't know what to put it, but somebody passing away if you had an immediate family. The salaries, as you see in that table above, are for the 185-day work year and do not include stipends for other things. I learned that there were department head stipends, team leader stipends, content leaders, or extracurricular activities. By the way, any errors I do up here are mine. I'm not trying to make errors, but nobody else is forcing me. And it also does not include extended work hours or extended work days. If I read the contract right I think there were 3 spiked out: counselors, media specialists, or school psychologists. So that seemed to be what was in that contract. So my question, if you have the answer at the ready, is what is the average teacher salary?
I don't have that.
Okay, can you get that?
I can.
Okay, thank you. All right. So that is a contract that's up on the Amity website. If anybody's interested in it, it's right there. This is my attempt to summarize it for this board and anybody watching or anybody who might come in contact with this presentation.
Have you had some of your senior teachers resign because of COVID, or are they?
Not because of COVID, they're resigning because they're ready to
They're
retire.
ready to go.
But that
I
is
didn't know if
already.
they just with the end class, some school districts and some people I deal with have had people just say, enough's enough, I can't do this anymore. And they'd
Yes.
be at this level, and then we get to go back to that. And
Well, so all the resignations or retirements that we know of are already accounted for in the budget. And not every high-step retiree necessarily results in the hiring of a lower-step novice teacher. For example, if you had a specialized, and I'm just making this up, but person who is dual certified in physics and chemistry, I may not be able to find somebody with 0 experience
Oh, yeah,
to
no.
replace them with.
nor would we
So-
probably want them.
So
No
anyway,
offense, but-
it's not quite as simple as the step
Right.
13 retires and we automatically go to a
Well-
step 1.
No, I get that, and I think the other thing we're starting to see, or Mesa, I don't know if you've seen it, because I don't know how this compares to other districts, but poaching because there are shortages because of these retirements, and
Yeah. We have people leaving mid-year constantly. So, yes.
Okay, so that's the contract with the Amity teachers. There's a second contract I stumbled across, and that was the Amity administrators group, From what I understood, there was a 2.25% salary increase from the prior year. These was some of the data that I saw in the contract. Again, the sick leave, you can read the numbers there. Number of days per year, personal leave, family passing, and vacation days of 30. Sometimes there's it might be like $2,000 stipend if you have a PhD or an EDD. So my question is, how many administrative staff are in this group? About.
Yeah. Come back to me and I'll have that answer. in
Okay,
about
so we'll
30
put those two
seconds.
questions. Okay, all right, all good. All right, so, but that's the data, right? That's the data, all right? Min. There are others, and John, we found others, including your contract, Dr. Byers, on the Town of Orange website where there was I don't know who keeps it, but they have contracts for ABOE and OBOE, and there were individual contracts, and some of these look like people that were already on this list here. I don't know if they are or not. Terry, I saw your name here, or Director of Finance anyway. So it is what it is. So that's that. Now, I had a question, and I want to go to an Excel file. And Terry, you were the one who sent it to me, so I don't want to step on Dr. Byers, but whoever wants to answer. And I was trying to understand these certified salaries in central administration. This is one of the two Excel files, guys, I sent you over the weekend. It's on page 105 of the document that we have. I think it is. Let me see if I got that right. Yeah, page 105 of the PDF document. That's the big printed handout that we have. And I assume one of these FTEs would be Dr. Byers, but I didn't know who the other FTE would be.
Director of Curriculum.
Director of Curriculum, okay. So the first thing I said, and I got it wrong, by the way, I didn't notice that it was 2.5 over here for the budget that we're talking about in the future, next year's budget. But because I saw this, wow, $75,000 increase, what's going on? But I missed that. But what I didn't understand is when I clicked on this, it didn't have a number. It had like 3 numbers in the exact Excel. You see it right there, Terry?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I reprinted those numbers over here, getting back to the PowerPoint, so we can kind of talk about it. So those were the numbers. I'm just trying to understand what those numbers refer to.
Salaries, curriculum writing stipends and salaries.
Oh, okay. Curriculum writing stipend, is that another FTE or an admin?
It's teaching staff who works on revising curriculum.
And why is it in the certified salaries line of this?
Because they're certified teachers who are performing that, and that's the way it needs to be coded according to the state accounting system.
So is that related to the 2 FTEs on the certified salary line
It's
item
under the
here?
category of central administration, so there's different parts of an account number. There's an object code and there's a function.
Right.
Where it's by where we're supposed to code them in the state.
Okay. Okay, and it had the same thing when I went over to here. But I wasn't quite sure. I wasn't quite sure how to read those numbers, those 3 numbers on the right, because the first number, if the first number was 209,416 and now it became 279,768, that's a large jump, and
It includes the half a position,
Yeah.
the DEI half a position.
Oh, that's where the DEI thing comes in, right in certified salaries of central administration. Ah, all right. Roger
A lot of
that.
work to ask a question.
Huh?
So you did a lot of work to ask a question.
Yeah. Hey, there's the 2.5 over there on the right.
Yeah. But I
It's a
didn't
big,
expect it. I didn't expect DEI to show up in the, kind of like the superintendent's office type of thing, myself, okay?
So that basically says that it's a $70,000 position, is what it looks like, right?
I don't know. We'll have to think about it. I
Well,
don't
if
know.
you take the other two at 30 and 32, and the other 222 and 225, those look to be like the salary increases for those two positions. And then the difference between the 209 and the 279 is 70,000, which part of that 70 would be an increase for the existing certified, and in addition to that, half of the FTE for the new curriculum.
Yeah, it sure sounds like that FTE is kind of on the order of these kind of salaries rather than these kind of salaries.
I mean, administrator versus teacher.
Yeah, it's a half a position at
Well, they would also
probably
include the benefits.
60, probably not 70, because.
60 for half, so that'd be
50 or
120
60,
to, well, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what I was exploring. I mean, I explored more than that, but I just, since it was in the area code of salaries, I thought I would just throw it there. Kevin, to your point, the standard set of charts Terry has provided and updated me and educated me on trying to get the numbers right, so I hope I've done it justice. This is looking at Amity since 2005, when I started on this board and was in your position, Joe, at Amity. And Kevin, you're right, and we'll see in a second, so why don't we just fire it up. This is the students' population at Amity. The high water mark of 2009, 2010 to the estimate of next year at 21, 24. That's 425 fewer students from that high mark down to where we are now. That's a 16.7% decrease, Joe. Common way to think about that, since 16 2/3 is 1/6. We used to have 6, now we have 5. Okay? And it's in that vein, I think, Dr. Byers, that Kevin was asking his question about guidance staff. I believe, if I remember correctly, in going through the contract, there is a notation that the guidance staff should have each guidance person should have no more than 250 students. That would lead me to say that at 21, 24, we would be comfortably within the 9 times 250 is 2250 zone. And it would strongly support your gut feeling, Kevin, that we have probably for 4 or 5 years been under the 2250 mark, whereby we could, by contract, have one less guidance council. For whatever good and just reason, this is the data. The FTEs were flat for 10 years. That's full-time equivalents. Might be an industry term, I don't know. The data is it's gone up in the last 4 years by 16. All right? Some of the reasons Dr. Byers has shared with us for tonight on the proposed budget, should say proposed for 22-23 on the lower right. But it certainly shows that staff has been significantly increasing in the last 4 years. The data shows it. And not surprisingly, the students, which have gone down, and FTEs that have gone up, the ratio shows that. There's been a decrease of 8.1 in that high watermark of 2008, 2009, down to 6.3. That's a 22% decrease over that period. It doesn't necessarily say good, bad, or indifferent. It just says that's what the data is. When you look at cost per student, this just takes the budget and divides by the number of students. You can see what the data is. I took out, by the way, Joe, you'll probably be asking how come I don't have the numbers on all of them. That's because the chart became too busy. You know, they wouldn't fit, but we can get the numbers. It's all good. But you can see that what it means to have budgets like this from last year to the proposed one for this year. The dollars per student go up significantly, and that would be an 8.3% increase in the dollars per student. It doesn't make it good, bad, or indifferent. It just is what it is. Okay? And as we have seen before, the 16-year average up until this current year is the red line there on budget increases. And the average has been 2.35. And as Dr. Byers has been very forthright in stating that currently the proposal of her budget is 4.92, over double that 16-year average. One of the quizzical things I find is the issue of the surplus. And I have a number of questions about it, but the data shows the following. For 12 years, we had a little bit touchy surplus. And many of the years, more or less, what are we going to do? Argue about 500,000, 600,000? I mean, they got a big budget. They have to have a buffer a little bit. Okay. So that was the surplus average, was about 1.19 million for about those 12-year period. But what's been happening in the last 4 years is that the average surplus has been almost 3 million each year. There's the data. And that means that in the last 4 years, almost 12 million of taxpayer money, half of it was from Orange, went to surplus. Okay? Not asking it to be zero, but it clearly is significantly higher than it has been in the past and seems to be significantly high. Okay. And many times the surplus does get fed back to the town, but not 100%. But it does suggest a couple of things which we'll get into. The first thing we need to understand is this. Over these last number of years, the blue is the amount of money being requested in the budget increase. The final budget, not the first proposed budget, the final budget. The orange is the dollar amount of the surplus in that very same fiscal year. It's very clear that the orange in the last 5 years has dwarfed the budget increase dollars. Now you have to step back and think of it like it's your own house. In any one particular year, this one, for example, right here, I'll read some numbers. In 17, 18, or 18, 19, you just pick one. The blue says, at the end of the budgeting cycle, we asked the budget at Amity asked for that much incremental money. And at the end of that year, it had a surplus of much higher than that. In one case, $587,000, 2.3 million. What that means is, had there been no blue, Joe, had there been no blue, Kev, right? We still would have had surplus, right? It would have been the difference between the blue and the orange. So in any one particular year, and in fact in 11 in the last 12 years, not counting they're almost the same in this particular year, 14, 15, Amity performed its job and didn't really need any increase. I don't know that necessarily at the beginning, but that's what historically has been shown over and over. So, whereas we say point number one is that these surpluses significantly overtax all of our taxpayers, residential and commercial. That the surplus money is higher than the budget increases themselves. In any of those years, you could have had a 0% increase and still had a sizable surplus. And it has another thought as well. And that has to do with the concept that the small blue budget increases as a percentage has been, and I think I heard words earlier tonight, have been, we tried to hold the line, but wait a minute. You have to look at it from what was your actual spent in a year to what you have for the next year budget. And that percentage increase, because of the size of the surpluses, have been roaringly high and have been that way for a while. It's been more than 4 times on average what the budget-to-budget increases have been. And it's been this way for a while. This is fundamental math. One of the things I also want to talk about, and then I'll give it back to the team, is the budget surplus data we get every month. Here's the first chart I tried to do for the last 3 years. And the reason you don't have surpluses over at the end of the year is because one of the years is the years we're currently in, all right? That's what I'll call the gray year, and I stopped doing it in November. But there's the data on the bottom, and if you want the Excel file, I can give it to you. Yeah, I did the research. But here's what I realized. That while we see these surpluses very large, even though we only have a little bit of a percentage increase, what I'm observing is as we go through the budget process, when we get to March 15th, for example, in the Amity Board of Education, those 13 voting members vote on a budget. They only have data from through the end of February. So this is the only data our elected officials have when the budget decisions are made. Right now, we only have the data through December, right? And in a certain way, the person's presenting the budget, they too live in that degree of uncertainty. But what we know for a fact, historically, is that it tends to have what's known in industry as a hockey stick syndrome, that all of a sudden at the end of the year, sales come roaring in, right, Kevin? You know what I'm saying when you were at Bayer, right, Kev, right? Yep. Hockey stick. But when it's consistently like this, it feels to me that we're forcing people to make decisions when it looks like this, when in fact it's really going to look like that. And so when you look at increases in budgets, such as the budget you see on the left here for going from fiscal year 2021 to 21-22, it appears we have a 1.8% increase going from that number, 50 million, to 51 point whatever over here. But in fact, when you have a large surplus, you're really starting from the top of the blue going up to the top of the green on the right. And that these have very significant, if you're talking about a budget that from what you actually spent to what you need to get to, there is a buffer in there, wherever it's in this document. I've been looking at these documents for 15 years. They're extremely detailed. They're very well written. But every year we come up with the same situation. And we certainly have in the last 4 years. And that's where I have trouble with increases, knowing that we have surpluses in the current year budget. We're even talking about spending them already. I believe we have already got 6 items in this budget on page 24 for 65,000 end-of-year purchases. I think you even mentioned in your presentation you want to use over $1 million on the 2% thing that got passed by your legislature for a capital non-reserve account. So we know there's surpluses in there. And I don't see why the surplus that's in there isn't covering the funding requests that are so needed.
All set?
Well, for that section, I want you guys to ask questions. I mean, there's plenty of stuff. I had 10 sections, remember?
No.
Yeah.
No, we've been through that every meeting on the surplus situation, so. Just if anybody has questions, let's get them answered, or Jim, continue with what you have questions on. But that was not a question, that was more of a history lesson.
Jim, do you know, is the state statute, that 2% threshold, is that something relatively new?
Yes.
How
So
new?
it was 2 years ago, they
Okay.
increased it for local boards of education, and then
Yeah.
it was an oversight that regional boards were not included.
Right.
So last year was the first year we could have requested 2%. So yes, it's brand new.
Yeah, because I know it used to be 1%.
Yes.
So that was obviously a change at the state legislature level,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
That is correct.
Local boards. Have we ever heard that from our local board, Kevin?
Well, they used to have a 1%. Sounds like they now have 2.
They do.
Yeah, but they don't keep it. If they have money, they're gonna fix something, and they don't have a fund balance, the Orange Board of Ed.
No, I thought I heard Dr. Byers say that local boards of ed could,
They could.
But it's a 2% capital non-recurring reserve. It goes for capital.
But like Dr. Byers said earlier in the meeting with the debt service,
right,
we own the buildings.
right.
We fix with capital the sidewalks, the ceilings. The town pays for
So
that.
there's no, but
They
why
don't,
would,
they don't have a capital
but
fund.
why would any local,
Why wouldn't what?
why would any local board of ed?
Every town's different.
Okay,
That's true.
all right.
Kev, just for your information, Mr. McNamara, we talked about this, Jen, in maybe February, not February, in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the 2%
Yeah.
increase was requested, and then the AFC recommended, we made a motion to do 1%, which we approved unanimously, and then went to the board, which they ultimately approved as well. So the 2% was proposed to us in the fall, and we just proposed 1%, approved it, and that stuck with the Board of Ed. So that
Gotcha.
2% was not approved.
And just to be clear, it's part of the presentation and packet more as a statement of possibility, not in anticipation of
Right.
it being a reality.
Right.
I mean, my question to you ladies would be, do you agree with Jim's slides? I mean, it's fundamental differences in how things are going versus the reality. And we talk about this all the time, as I've mentioned the last couple of meetings with our AFC. Those are real numbers. And like right now, it feels like you need this money. It sounds like you need it, but at the end and this year's going to be a different year, probably, it already is. So, but if you get a $2 million surplus, do you need this increase of 4%, 5%, or 8%? The answer would be no, but right now you feel you need it, but then when the end of the year comes, you don't necessarily need it anymore. So I don't know, how do you get from here to the end of the year, figuring out what the budget needs to be. We haven't done a good job with it the last 4 or 5 years, especially the last 4 or 5 years, with a $3 million average surplus. So I don't know. But right now, it feels like you guys need it. You need it. You feel like you're stressing out that you really need the money, but then when the year ends, you don't necessarily need all of that money. So is this year going to be that much different? It sounds like yes, but not $3 million worth of difference, I don't think. I don't know, it's hard to, because you guys are stressing out that you need this, you need FTEs, the education has certainly shifted in this country for sure. You're seeing more mental illnesses, you're seeing broken up families, you're seeing, violent children, you're seeing special needs for whatever the reasons, and it sounds like the resources are switching towards that. And then while the students continue to decline, enrollment continues to decline the last 10 years. So how do we fix this? As a country, as a town, as a regional board, how do we fix this? What do we do here? What can we do here to fix it? It's really the question.
I didn't see it.
Yeah. And then medical this year is finally catching up to 100%, 105% versus the last several, because people didn't go to the doctor for obvious reasons. So it's just like, how do we get this back in balance here? Something doesn't make sense, like Jane said. The enrollment is declining, but our budgets continue to increase. Something's not computing here.
Can I, going back to, I don't know where to ask it, so I'll just ask it on this question, this slide here. Yeah, I see that sick leave, 15 days per year. Do you have a sense of how much utilization there is of that?
Is that sick or is that vacation time?
That's sick,
That's sick
sick leave,
time.
Joe.
That's
A
sick,
lower
okay,
left, yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry, I thought it was higher in the screen.
Okay.
No, they,
We don't necessarily have a sense. We have to report it as an aggregate to the state.
yeah,
So it's the total number that's used. I can say that in the past 2 years, we have definitely had more people use sick leave because they have had to when they have been either
COVID.
quarantined or isolated for COVID. So
Okay.
I would say we've definitely seen an increase in the use of the sick leave. What we've also, though, seen correspondingly, at least until this year, was that people did not take the longer term sick leave for medical procedures because
Right.
those were not happening. So now we're starting to see the use of that also going up, while at the same time we're still having to employ sick leave for quarantine and isolation periods.
I'm sorry, Jim.
No.
Does the unused carry over
It
to
carries
accumulate
over-
it towards retirement?
It carries over contractually, but if they don't use it upon retirement, Mr. Leahy referenced this, there's kind of a grandfather clause of people who do get paid out. That number is very,
Very
very
small
small
right
at
now.
this point, and everybody else loses it if they haven't used it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
maybe one way of doing this is really see if I can do it. Okay. All right. When I was reading this section of, I think it was one-on-one devices, I was trying to imagine being in high school, in the repair for one-on-one devices caught my eye. What's the user responsibility for the I don't know, safety, protection, whatever, of one-on-one devices?
The user being the students?
I'm trying to imagine myself walking around high school with a laptop when we didn't, obviously when I was in high school, we didn't have that, right? And I'm trying to imagine what life was like as I'm listening to the repairs for one-on-one devices. And my mind went back into being in the hallway and in fact being back in grade school, because in grade school, the last thing you would ever have is lose your textbook. I mean, because your family had to pay for it. And I'm wondering what the policy is for one-on-one devices.
Well, we consider them just like other school properties. So if student left their textbook in the rain and it got wet, they had to pay for a new one. If they leave their one-on-one device out in the rain, they will have to pay for a new one.
So the responsibility is 100% on the user, pretty
Not-
much.
Not all the time, because sometimes they're kids and
Yeah, you got bullying, we
legitimate
talked bullying
accidents
earlier. right?
happen.
Okay. One of the things that caught me in the very same page, the budget assumes 2 retirements, to date 2 are submitted. And before you answer too quickly on that one, I think I was over on page 31, so I'll just head right there and bare my soul if I'm wrong. All right.
Yeah, you're looking where it says 5 and 3 are known?
Yeah. Where is that,
It's on
Kevin?
page 31.
I was on page 31, but I couldn't find it in my notes, so I keep a...
Risk factor.
It's right under the risk factor, it's highlighted out.
I'm sorry, Kev. Am I on the right
So I'll
page
have
yet?
to update that, because that's last year's data, because
Okay.
normally we do budget
Yeah.
for 5, but because we've had such
Okay.
high turnover, we've only got 2.
I was trying to
this
find a
year.
way to express it,
Yep.
still maintaining team this year, okay? So I just wanted to mention that I noticed
2 or
it.
3? We have 3, right?
Highlight here for
Okay.
a second.
3 now?
Yeah.
See, you know, it's funny, right? You go through this document, and again, Dr. Byers, Terry, before you, Jack, Levine, and, you know, and Chip was DeMay, you get 20 pages of risk, right? And, you know, you're almost on pins and needles, like, oh, the risks involved here. And then you go back at the end of the year, and we have these surplus. Doesn't feel like risk to me. And I just don't know how to get my arms around it, so and it's troubling.
I mean, here's the thing, if the budget came in at 0% this year, just say you started at 0, and you went through it, could you make it at a 0% budget? Right now, you would say, no way I'm gonna be able to do that because of all of these things. But if we just said, the board says, okay, we're at a 0 budget, cut everything, and let's see where we go. And if you have surpluses, then maybe fund them next year. But like I said, we're stressing out now, but then in the next 4 to 5 months, that stress factor goes away and the surplus rises. Maybe not as much this year. I think we see that it won't be as much. But how do we get through the next 4 to 5 months of managing our stress to keep the levels, get them in check, keep them reasonable? We haven't been able to figure that out. Like last year, remember we approved the 0.49 and it went to 1.8, and obviously the surplus was way up. That's why I said we could have done that, and you guys won't let me. I had to vote no.
Well, we
So,
don't know what the 1.8 is
oh,
going
I
to
will,
result in,
of course,
right?
of
Because
course.
that's the current school year.
But the 0.49 that we talked about, when we had put that number in place and voted on it, we could have easily have hit that. But at that point, you stress out so much, you don't think you can get to that point. But then in 4 to 5 months, we got there. Times, $3 million.
Well, no,
So-
because the 1.8 again is this current year, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So we
yeah, this
don't
year.
know that
Yes,
that's what
that's
we would
right.
have been
Yes.
able to,
Yeah.
we can't
Why
make
not?
that
No.
assumption.
No, I roger that. But that's why this chart is so troubling.
Well, I don't think anybody knew when we presented the budget in February, when the board voted on it in March of 2020, that we would shut down school for 3
Oh, yeah.
months. So, to have a surplus in 2020 of $3.4 million when we didn't run a bus, we didn't have an after-school activity,
Athletics.
and you want to compare that to a normal school year, it's not a normal school year. Fiscal
Terry-
year '21 is not a normal school year. So you're looking at numbers, and yes, you are seeing large surpluses, but that is not what we budgeted to run that kind of school year. We did not
Terry-
plan for those things to happen.
I hear you. 2 factors. 17-18 was not a COVID year.
That was the lowest number of Anthem claims on their books for that year. So we saved money on paying insurance company because we're self-insured.
But it wasn't a $3 million tag that we saved, okay? And you had mentioned as if that $3 million in 1920 was because of, we were pretty much shut down. And if there wasn't these other years just like this in, all through, okay? I mean, the data's right here.
The
Okay?
data's also in my monthly forecast where I analyze every year and explain where those surpluses come from.
You can see that they're, roger that, but you can see that they're out there every year. And that they dwarf what the ultimate, not the initial, which is what this proposed budget is, the ultimate budget. And we talk about, you know, we all love our town, all right? A lot of us on this have done extraordinary things in and outside this committee for things about this town, all right? We're all pulling in the same direction, but we have to also say, here's what we're seeing here, okay? And the over budgeting that has resulted in surpluses have overtaxed our residents, right? That the money eventually comes back, most of it, all right, is what prior superintendents have asked this board, and we fed them back our feedback of send all the money of the surplus back to the town, except in dire circumstance. That hasn't happened 100% of the time. But, you know, we're not going to quibble over a couple $100,000 here or there. Not when we're talking about this amount of money. But the systemicness of this is troubling. And particularly when it shows up like so. And it might be that there is conservatism that brings, throughout the year, that brings out the spikes that happen after the budgets are set, the voting's been done, all right? And all of a sudden, voila, in May and June, and all of a sudden we're off for the summer. And meanwhile, our elected officials are faced with seeing only that data with a lot of risk, when history is showing that these are systemic, they're significant, and they need to be addressed. So while we can empathize with situations and good decisions and the honest and goodness of what you're trying to do, we can't also at the same time avoid looking at what the data is showing to us. I have a couple of other little questions. You mentioned on page 42, power school training. I'll go up to it right now on the screen.
Is that a different page than 42?
I think it's 42, maybe it's not, Kev.
Yeah, it's 42.
It is 42?
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine, I used to,
Contingency, yeah.
in my 6 years of teaching, you know, sometimes you'd get I don't know what, 2 or 3 weeks of working in the summer, right? I don't know what, it wouldn't be called summer school, but it was summer school for teachers, I guess. And I didn't know what it meant for Reader Workshop Summer Institute and for the $12,000 for 3 additional staff members to attend Power School training. And I thought that Power School, is that something you have to use if you're a teacher?
Power School is our student learning or our student management database. So if
Okay.
you think of running a company, if you have an HR database,
Yep.
Power School is the equivalent for our student database.
So my 125 students that I'd be teaching, I'd be using Power School?
Power School would be where you would be inputting grades, but it's also where our administrators do scheduling. It's where we track everything that's associated with that student, whether
Mhm.
they have a medical alert, an individualized education plan, a 504 plan. It's got all of their emergency contacts. It's where we follow their credits. It's what ultimately generates a transcript. It is everything that runs all of the student information that we have.
Now, is this $12,000 being paid to Power School to train the 3 people? Or is it to fund, to say, hey, Jim, you're gonna go to Power School and we'll give you some money to go?
No, it's that Power School sends us a bill and says, if Jim is going, it will cost you
you this amount.
$4,000 to send him there.
So is that a requirement for a teacher to have gone to Power School training before they become,
No, it's not a.
proficiency
Well,
type of thing?
every teacher has to learn how to use it, but they actually don't attend the institute. The Power School training would be for kind of the more advanced level people who are actually doing things like scheduling or who are running
Like
queries.
department heads, that type of thing?
It could be department heads, it could be counselors, it could be some of our instructional technology staff who do a lot of that work.
Uh-huh.
It could be a lead teacher, it could be a building administrator.
Okay.
You good? I just wanted to go back, my own, I guess it's trying to figure out what's really going on in your school. I think it was in the special ed, you had $135,000 in legal.
What page, Kev?
I don't I'm looking at the presentation.
Yeah,
And you
I'm
said are those parents suing the district because they don't feel things were done?
More than likely, yes, I would say yes.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, there it is.
So it's the district defending ourselves from lawsuits from parents?
Yes,
Really?
yes,
Really? It's crazy.
yes.
Special
They
ed.
expect it, they want it.
That's the way it
Well,
goes.
is that on the special ed, or is that overall?
That's just on the special
It's just specific to
education side.
special ed?
Correct, because then we also have general, like if we're negotiating a contract or something like that, we have general legal fees as well.
That's the chart you're talking about, Kev, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I saw that. I said, well, I'm not surprised.
And then I think when you were commenting in here, are we now responsible up to age 22?
So, yes, so it used to be when a student turned, like it was, like if it was within their 21st year, they would exit kind of like in June, at the end of the year, because it made sense. We are actually responsible for students, and this is brand new, it started first last
I think
year.
last year's first.
We are responsible up until the last day that they are 21 years old, and on the day they turn 22 is the day we now exit those students. So for some students, it added essentially an additional year of special education services that we have to provide.
Special education college, Kev, 4 years. Think about it.
And that's
Yeah.
just special ed kids, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Down there.
Yes.
And what's the enrollment?
It would be, sorry, for our most severely disabled student. So it's probably not impacting more than, say, 3 or 4 within each of those age ranges, probably 15 altogether.
In the whole program?
But at the same time,
Expensive.
it's the one that's the most
Yeah,
expensive
sure,
because
sure,
you're providing the most service.
Yep.
And as we talk, there's no caps on that, no caps on the cost. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
You're
So
welcome.
that the state basically added a year with no assistance.
Well,
I believe it was actually the federal government's interpretation. To truth be told, my understanding is the state of Connecticut was interpreting the law incorrectly, and we were corrected as to how to interpret the law.
unfunded
Um,
mandates.
seems like we're going up, I'm looking at page 35, it's up on the screen here, team. I noticed that this 3 went to 8 and 1 went to 3. So that pretty much, how come you got, what's the driver of, what happens at Sound School?
Some magnet school, dealing with, similar to aquaculture in Bridgeport, it has to do with aquatics.
What kind of, in Bridgeport?
Aquaculture
Aquaculture.
and aquatics.
Oh, aquatic.
So it's like Long Island Sound is where
Yeah.
the sound comes from.
Okay,
Sound school.
okay. That's a big jump.
So we send the students to those schools, we cover the cost,
Correct.
because parents are paying taxes and
Yes.
kind of, okay,
We're
okay.
required.
Yeah, if they're in your district and,
Yeah.
And,
but that's why they were, you know, what she went through earlier, and I agree with, if we could bring these people in-house,
It's cheaper, of course.
It's a lot
Of
cheaper.
course it is, sure.
Yes, for some things. For VOAG programs like these, it
have those,
wouldn't be.
I think, how firm are you making your commitment and all the
Now,
resources?
are those 4-year programs?
Yes. They're
So after
9 through
middle
12
school, They go to
schools.
the sound school or the VOAGs or whatever?
Correct.
Is there a specialty, like a Trumbull that they do?
That's VOAG.
Again, I don't know. I don't know why students select them.
Oh, okay, so people can select which of these they want to go to?
Yes.
Those are the agricultural kids. They-
Right.
They go there or they go to Nanawag, which is up in Woodbury.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, right, roger that.
Jimmy Z.
Huh, okay.
Engineering is the one in West State and
Yep.
Beach.
We have to
Yep.
provide transportation
It
if
is,
they
yeah.
decide to do that?
Yeah,
Nobody's
Yes.
there.
Hmm?
Nobody's going.
Yeah.
for most of them.
It's interesting.
Wow. Wow.
You talk about how the business of education has changed, and just the resources and what's required and the paras
Well,
and
the options.
the support, and the options and the cost. I mean, one stat I saw, Jim, that really stuck out was 25,000 per student right now, and in the current budget request, it's getting pretty expensive. to go
Well,
to-
remember,
Yeah, I mean, all in.
I look at it, we look at
Yeah,
it as what is the cost to the
well,
taxpayer.
sure, that's what it is,
right?
it's real cost.
In the educational circles, they typically take out such things, well, for example, what debt do
Debt
you
service,
take out?
yeah.
Because, you know, it's not fair, for example, if you're looking at cost per student K through 6, and we, as a town, have facilities and debt and all that. So you can see why you have different numbers on cost per student when you compare them various ways, as long as you define it and everybody says, okay, that's your definition. But when we're here, if it's money out of the pocket here
Money,
from a
it's
taxpayer, then
It's a cost, it's a cost.
it's a cost. I mean,
Yeah. Easy way to calculate it.
as he reaches for his phone, knowing he didn't turn it on vibrate. Before it happens, I have to do that, Kevin, sorry.
Terry, is there a couple new budget items in here on page 17 and 18? It looks like the account 5860, OPEB Trust. There was nothing budgeted last year, and there was nothing forecasted for this year, yet there's a $267,000
Right.
new budgetary item, or?
It's not a new item. In previous years, we funded it. The fund has done well, but
Yep.
the actuaries and the accountants have actually requested that we run the fund differently. Instead, we fund the full amount and we run all the retiree claims directly through the fund. So there's an offsetting reduction on the health medical line.
Okay. Is that a recommendation from your current actuary, or is it a new
Yes.
actuary that you
No,
got?
current
Current?
actuaries. And it's been in place, and it's really how the OPEB trust is designed to work, is that
Yeah.
you run the retiree benefits directly through that account.
Okay, so it's not like a new actuary came in and said,
No.
oh, you got to do this.
No, and it's been a couple of years that they've, as the fund was developing, that they were recommending we do that, so.
Okay. And there's also on page 18, it looks like pupil transportation, looks like had a huge increase, 8% increase. Now, that's usually
So that includes
contractual,
special ed.
includes special ed?
Includes our contractual, our, bringing to school back and forth every day, includes
Yep.
athletics, and then it also includes all the
Special
special
ed.
education.
Yeah, so it's probably skewed by
So,
special ed.
Whether
probably.
out of
Yeah.
place, out of district placements, special vans.
Yep. Okay. And also, under other professional technical services, we had a $325,000 increase. That comes out to almost a 19% increase. What's driving that?
So that's where our leases are for our one-to-one devices, and that's where our legal fees are. So
Yeah.
we had previously used some ESSER funds to pay for some of the leases for
Yep.
one-to-one, when those funds became available, and we had to speed up our timeline of one-to-one. So now we've exhausted that option, and now.
And
they're
ESSER funds
into
were
the
only for a
budget.
year, right? For this
Pardon?
year, ESSER funds?
Well, there's,
It depended on which one you had, because there have
Yeah.
been 3 rounds of ESSER funding.
Yeah.
So the first was for a year, the second was for last year and this
This year.
year, and the third could have been for this year and next year.
And then technology supplies, account 5695, all the way down the bottom. There's a $462,000 increase to the budget.
but if you look at the line above it, you see a large
Other
decrease.
supplies, 390, yep.
So we basically broke out other supplies where technology supplies used to be, but
Yep.
because of the one-to-one and how much supplies are for technology,
Okay.
we have identified them on their own. We did the same with equipment. We separated out technology from other equipment, and we also
Gotcha.
put it at the school level so we can better track that we're being equitable across the schools and what schools are using what software and making sure that everything is being utilized before we budget for it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Terry, let me, while I got you here, this was something that I surfaced a couple months ago, so I'll just use this, and if it's another one of these, we have to take it for another day, that's great. It took me a while to get educated that we had a medical and dental budget, I'll call that, in the Excel file, okay? And then we had a claims budget, which is in the Word file, right? And what struck me is last year, and that's why I created this chart, and you had chimed in explaining there would be reasons for differences why these two would be out of sync, but obviously they have to be connected, right? So I first noticed that this had been an upward spike in the two documents, and so to me, I was looking for a mapping, I called it, between the two budgets. Because where I have this big spike, how come I have this big difference between, I'll put it on full screen now, between this number here, the Word document, the claims, 4.5 million, but I'm only budgeting 3.675, right? And you had said some words, the reason for the difference is it could be fees, employee contributions, grant funding, employer contributions, whatever. Fine. So I was looking for something that would look like this, whereby in each year, we have the two budget numbers, and this is significant going forward, right? Because we have increases significant to understand them. And I just put down here, I just copied and pasted really into Excel the things that you had mentioned in your response, okay? So I'm hopeful that we can understand the difference for the current fiscal year, and as we go forward for any future year, if there's a difference between the two, for the sake of understanding and transparency, I just put down other factor 1, other factor 2, other factor, 1, 2, 3, up to n, so that these two budgets have a reconciliation, or what I termed a mapping. Is that possible?
Well, Mr. Leahy, I'm sure you must be doing that for the town, so if you have a file that the town is using, why don't we just share that and we could do it in the same manner?
I don't know, John, if we,
We get our reports from Anthem and our consultant. We don't have a file per se.
I thought, from hearing your response, which is, I just quote up there, and if I quote you wrong, it's my error, not yours, that there was data that married these two numbers, 4,498,824 in budgeted claims, right, budgeted claims, and what we budgeted for the budget, the actual money in the Excel file in the budget for that particular year, the year we're currently in. So I just said to myself, oh, there's a number for fees, there's a number for employer, error on me for spelling or typing,
The
all right?
employee.
Yeah, a cool one, huh? Grant funding. There may be other factors I'm not aware of. I just would like there to be awareness, particularly when I start seeing numbers that have a wide difference of what things that probably should be close together and in the past had been very close together. All of a sudden, it's a factor of 3. That's all I was looking for. And I thought that it must be available because we know what constitutes one budget. We know we landed on this other budget. We've done it a period of years. And so I just said, well, and clearly some of these numbers have to be negative, right? Or else you're not going to get from 44 down to 36, right? So that's all I was looking for. And I mean, I'd be happy to help create it. If we have to create a unique thing, I'll do that. You know, I can help, but I'm just looking for how does it fit together? And frankly, I went back in the years of doing this with you, Terry. You know, when they were kind of close, I just didn't pay it no mind. It was only because when it got 800,000 difference, I said, wait a minute here, there's something going on, and we can't see it. So anyway, that's my thought on medical and dental expense. And I'm going to have the same questions as we go forward too. I mean, I don't want to have them. They're just sitting there.
Okay.
I'll stop, kid.
You'll stop. Anybody have any more questions?
I mean, I'm waking up at night of this stuff.
I know you are.
6.27%.
You gotta go for a run in the middle of the night.
I can tell by the
How are we gonna
analysis.
do this?
Yeah.
Saturday mornings, Friday nights.
I'm serious.
How much ARP funding, like you have the half the position, the new proposed position, that's covered half, is there other things in here that are covered? That,
Under ESSER?
They're not in the budget because if they're grant funded, so.
okay, so they're not,
Yeah, they're outside of the operating. budget.
like I can look at this as, all right, if you do go forward with this position, I don't think you should, but if you do, that's 60 grand, that's gonna show up next year on top of the 60, give or take, that's in this budget.
Right.
There's not other items like that in here because of those funds.
There, I think
There's a
there's a social worker
of-
that's partially funded
Yes.
by grant funds that will eventually come over to the budget. There's part of the sped teacher for
Yes.
the ED program that will come over. What's probably coming over in this year's budget. So,
We were very cautious in using our ESSER, or any of the ESSER monies for staff, because we know that then.
Builds a hole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of it went for things that were what it was intended for, like renting the tent to have senior prom, and like it was one-off purchases, because we knew what it would do to a budget. Unlike other districts that did use it for a lot of staffing, we actually tried to avoid that significantly.
summer remediation programs, so hopefully that we don't have to run those every year, that we ran those to address the loss during the pandemic, but those won't have to continue in the future.
Two questions. Somewhere I thought in here, I've read this 4 or 5 times, but I can't find it now. Historically, we've had the, I guess there would be key dates for the Amity would be, whoa, violation on me. It's kind of, if I remember it, Dr. Byers, the 14th of March, perhaps, at that meeting, you're trying to finalize the budget, is that right?
By,
Is that-
by our policy, we would need it approved by March 15th. So
Yeah.
yes, we would be looking, from the Board of Education, so we would be
Okay.
looking at March 14th.
And usually there's a cram by the end of February to get it nailed down, is the way I remembered it.
That is correct.
Because I think it says in the AFC charter, you're supposed to have it done by the end of February. I'm sure that that could be worthy of an edit, but as of right now, that's what it says. Now, when is the district meeting? I remember like early April? Or
is
did you
April.
change it to May this year?
No, it is April 4th.
April 4th? Okay, let me just go to put it. And the intent of the district meeting?
Is essentially a last opportunity for people to hear the presentation of the budget that the board adopted
Okay.
on the 14th,
Right.
and then to provide feedback.
So
Okay.
it's required by law, so April 4th is the public hearing,
Public
Yes.
hearing?
and May 2nd is the annual district meeting,
Got those
which
backwards.
adjourns to a referendum.
Okay, so it's a district meeting over in May, you got, what, the second?
Second.
Second.
The violation on May 1st, I see. Joe, keep it fair over
Watch it,
there,
Jay.
yeah,
Watch it,
come on,
Jay.
man. Okay, and then the referendum is
The
May
3rd.
3rd.
3rd? Okay, and so, did I read that, is there any sense of, we're still gonna have the referendum, right?
That, it is always the board's option, that's just the way the policy and the statutes read. So we
Yeah.
put that in there, but that is not something the board has chosen to do, obviously.
When would they choose to do it, if they chose to do it? I mean, lead time being the way it is in life.
Well, they would need to signal to us probably at the March meeting, because from there we develop explanatory text, we have to put in ads in the newspaper, notifying people of meetings and dates and things, so
Yeah.
they would have to.
I don't think that would be a good idea, but anyway, that's just my thought. Okay, so those are the key meeting dates, and I can eventually massage them, Joe, with you on what's happening on those dates. All right, thank you.
You good?
I'm good.
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you very much for coming.
Can I just recognize Mr. Brow and Mr. Hartshorn? who
Absolutely.
Sat here through the whole thing very quietly in
Chris
the
and
back,
Sean.
but representing the Amity Board. of
Hold on, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do better than that. We're gonna do
No,
better
we're
than
not.
that. Yes, we
I need a
are.
mask break.
Hold on, it ain't gonna be that long. It ain't gonna be that long, but we're gonna have
Give him
to,
a star for the
yeah,
star.
you are exactly right, sir. You are correct.
Get a gold star.
They got one right over here.
I had no idea how
Brow.
many courses are offered from when I was there way back 100 years ago.
Mr. Sean, so Mr. Chris and Mr. Sean, if I'm gonna go first name, I gotta go first name for both. Okay.
And of course, some what?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're good. Thank you very much.
See ya.
Have a good evening.
Good, good.
John, could you grab Chris?
Because I need a sip.
Yeah, get the water.
Aye.
Hi.
Make sure he shuts us off with the sound.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let me go back over here.
All set? Okay, we are back at 9:25.
NDG?
Next item on the agenda is item number 5.
Yeah, we're gonna bring one.
Update, Mr.
No
Hussey.
further update. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No further update, thank you. Item number 6, Vice Chairman's report and possible vote on percentage increase to support for the Amity budget for July 1st.
Okay, I assume we're still back on camera, right?
We are.
So why don't we just remind everyone that what we've just gone through is one of the 3 major components of the town budget, of which 63+% are allocated for education.
I just saw that.
Are we good?
Yep, we're good. I
Okay.
shut my mic off.
And they look like this from a particular budget year in the past, but they're relatively good for what we're talking about here. In other words, Amity is about 34% of our budget. Orange Board of Education is about 29, the town is about 33, and capital and debt, if I've got the terminology right, is 2.9. I think you've spiked that one out in the past, John, right, recently, the capital and debt one? Yeah. All right, so that's what it is, and I use these, that the education costs for, include the town building, so we're familiar with that. The other part that we need to do, and this gets into the next item on the agenda, or is what do we support for the Amity budget? And this is important. We've done this the last few years. It does not mean that that's what they need to do. It's what we would be comfortable with in,
And it's what
in improving.
What
Something just went off.
our finance committee member goes to vote up there with.
That's correct. All right. So this is what we've done in the prior years with John's help and my research as well. Last year, we'll just focus on that as an example, we supported 0.47% increase for this year. The prior year, 2021, we supported a 2% increase. Now remember, we've already seen the data. We don't have the data in the current year, what the surplus is for the current year, 21-22. We know for a fact what the surplus was in 2021, and just to remind ourselves, so we can see it. For 2021, you can see it was 2.9 million, right? Which meant that the increase that was being asked, which we did not support that whole 1.8%, or that was 2.49%, I think, Kevin, that there still was a surplus way over and above that, okay? Which led this board to be reasonably conservative in looking at budgets for to support what we feel we would support for an Amity budget increase. I've already shared with you the hockey stick phenomena of how we find out about the level of surpluses historically. That may have been Ajit for you, and Kevin, you were here back when, but more new data. And what we usually do is ask ourselves, each of us, what level of increase would you be throwing out there that you would support for an Amity budget? I don't suppose it's going to be anywhere close to 4.92. So this is what we've done in the past. And I propose, Kevin, that this is what we do today as well. So, Mr. Moffett, as our senior man, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll go around the table and get everybody's thoughts, and we can kind of wander into a number or throw out a number and then talk about it?
Well, based on what we've seen, with the figures that you presented, you know, right along and also tonight, I would say.
Kevin, is your microphone on?
Oh, I'm sorry. My absolute hardball number would be 0. And as we've maintained, there's, with a zero-based budget that they have had, plus the increase, plus the surplus that they showed at the end of the last year, they, again, could have lived with a 0 increase and still had a surplus. Okay?
Yeah.
So my opinion, my hardball number would be 0. And then, depending on, that may be unrealistic, but that's a starting point for me anyway.
Kev?
Yeah, I actually tend to agree with Kevin as well. I've seen the historical data over the past 15 years. I was here for the first 2 of it, maybe 3, but I do agree that we really, if this year we really need to hold the line with a 0, if possible. There's a lot of other, inflationary factors that have to be taken into account with taxpayers this year. We're seeing record increases in inflation in all the commodities, gas, food,
How about your oil bill?
cars, oil, utilities. So I'd be of the mindset to definitely strongly desire a 0% as well. I feel pretty comfortable based on all the data that we've seen historically with the surpluses that a 0 could be sustained. There are a number of areas in the budget that do have fixed contractual costs. I do get that, but I think we're not looking at a trend of just 2 or 3 years here. You're looking over a pretty long period of time of historical surpluses. So I would be in full support of that.
Joe?
I mean, I've said 0, Kev, for the last couple of years. I agree with both of you guys, for sure. I mean, I don't think it's realistic. I think it's realistic based on the data that we know, but to go to them with a 0 is probably not realistic. And the other thing, Jim, do you have the slide for what the current surplus is? The Amity surplus in the last AFC package? I can grab it, but I mean, if you have it, I'm just curious, was it 600,000, I think?
No, it went down. I can show you.
I'm just thinking of what, I think 21, 22 is going to be a more COVID representative year than 19, 20, because that's when it started in March through June, it's only 3 months.
1 quarter, yeah.
21, 22 is really going to be COVID deterred, COVID affected data. So I'm really curious to see what the surplus is this year.
Well, no,
because
they went back to school in September, so they've been in
they've
the
been
classrooms.
in classroom, yeah, they've been in person. So I'm just curious, is it back to a more normal year? Is the surplus $1 million? Is it?
Well, I think it's back to a more normal year, but I also think, from, as people look at me like I'm a freak,
Yeah.
with this stuff, and it's all over my office and my car. If, what they're, and I listen to all news outlets in the world, and Israel's coming out now with their doctors thinking Omicron is it. Like, once we get through this wave,
It should be
the
done, yeah.
pandemic's over, and there's not gonna be another, hopefully they're right, and they're
Yeah.
ahead of us
Yeah.
with all the cases and everything else. So, I think in their current budget, there's probably a lot of money being spent on keeping that building cleaner than it's ever been in
Yeah.
history, on
Yeah.
sanitize, and so there's costs. We know we're gonna have a surplus, we don't know how big it is,
Yeah,
but it would be bigger if it was a more normal year than
Yeah.
this COVID year with everybody in the classrooms.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely, you're keeping, you're cleaning people there longer, I mean, because
Yeah.
it has to be done. And, so I think those costs actually drop next year. At least I hope they do, because I hope we're not doing this for another year.
I know. I mean, they're at, say, call it 5%. Like, the actual number's 8%, as we now know, actual the budget. I mean, in my mind, a 2% increase sticks out, but, I mean, for them to drop it from a 5 to a 2, they're gonna have to cut all of these FTEs that they're proposing.
The new ones, yeah.
These new programs, the diversity and DEI program. So it's gonna cut all of the new stuff they're proposing, which is,
But is it? Because
I know.
I'm looking,
Joe, they got $50 million here, I mean, you know.
what I'm looking
know.
at is budget over budget, $2.5 million increase.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That's what we're looking at here.
yeah.
Of that, I don't think, in this environment, like Kevin said, with inflation and everything going on, there's an awful lot that, and this is on their website, their whole school, their programs, their studies, they offer a ton.
Yeah,
This isn't the year to add more.
I know. I would
Whether it's the
agree.
DEI, whether it's
I would agree.
those,
The DEI is
the-
the pressure for what's
the-
going on in the country.
the other two
to do that.
teachers, one at each middle school,
Yeah.
you know, I'm fully behind the special ed part, because
Yes,
that
it
that
saves
helps
us money keeping them in school, for sure.
And if they need to add an SRO, we've always supported safety, and
Yeah.
we actually, you know, I think Kevin was here, when they actually took that out, and the towns picked up the cost.
Yes, right,
And now they put it back. You know, we said there's gonna be an officer there,
yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Even if you don't, they took it out of the budget, we're like, no. We'll pay for it, and the three towns paid for it. So, if this budget has a surplus, it's not gonna be 3 million, because medical's up a little bit. Say it's 2
$1.5
million.
million.
So then they only need, then we're talking about a $500,000 delta, which is 1%. Or they cut it, and it's 0, and we could get, I think you could get to 0.
We could, well, we definitely can get to 0, but, I mean, again, we could say 0, we could propose it, but it's not realistic. Like last year was.
Well, the
0.47
.47 wasn't realistic.
Guess what it was? And I said that to them multiple times, it was. It was very realistic.
It was, but they
Plus.
looked at us, laughed,
And
and
then
came
some.
in with a different number.
Right.
Whatever number we say tonight,
It doesn't matter.
for our board
It
and our.
definitely matters,
I'm saying
Joe.
it matters.
It matters,
because them-
Joe.
Because
Okay.
it's the public now.
Right.
Has to know, with the data that Jim's presented, what's really been going on, that, you know, if they stick to this, and it's a 6.27% increase in the town of Orange, are our people
That's realistic.
gonna vote
That's a
yes
real
on the
number.
Amity budget? And I don't think they will.
I hope they don't. I mean, go to 0, just put 0, I'm okay with 0.
Joe, I don't think you're okay with 0. I want you to be saying what you're okay with in all your communities. So I want you to just take a breath, because I don't want you, if you think Kevin is at 0 and Kevin Mack's at 0, and you may think I'm at 0, which I am not, okay? I want you to just say what you think is proper. That's all. We're a team here.
I've said 0 for how many years? Multiple times. We've settled on 4.9, we've settled on 2, 2.5. To me, I think 2 is, it's gonna be probably between 2 and 3 is what I'm thinking, where they need to cut it. They're at 5%. They're not gonna go to 0. They don't get that mindset of going down to 0. We know they can do it. And we talked tonight, they both sat there and said nothing.
So Joe, what's your
So-
number? Just give me a number.
Sounds like 2.
Sounds like 2. You just said 2.
You know what, put 2%, put 2,
All
put
right.
2.
All right, let's just, and you reserve the
Put
right to
2.
change it.
And then 0, then average 0 and 2 is what? 1.
No. We'll
I
do
live
this as a
with them.
team.
They're not going to go to 0, but it doesn't matter. It's okay.
Well, all right, let's let our new member, Ajit.
Yeah, so with declining enrollment and with the history of the surpluses, I'm comfortable recommending a 0% increase.
They should be cutting the budget below 0.
Kev?
Well, I'm, like I said, if there's a $2 million surplus and remove the new stuff that's in this year, which doesn't include the special ed side, I think you're at the number.
Yeah.
It's already there. So I would say 0 and or at worst 1%, which is a $516,000 increase.
So
That would mean they don't.
So do
We're
I-
gonna assume we have a built-in surplus, because what it is, we don't know yet. And then that gives them the 500, that puts them right exactly what they're asking for, and I'm saying 2 million of it's already there. I'm also thinking that none of these new positions, with the exception of special ed and the police officer, or whatever, the security officer, they're okay. But then again, that guidance counselor should come out.
Oh,
with the G, so.
That's 100
I
million.
talked myself into zero.
Okay. I'm not gonna do zero. I wish we weren't on camera because I can't tell you, I'll just honestly tell you 5 people, 6, 7. I don't enjoy the process of waking up almost every night thinking about this stuff, knowing what the percentage increase was, knowing what that means to, I'm not worried about 2 people, professionals. Yeah, they get kids and they get family and they're trying and all. I'm worried about the people that don't have, that still live in town, right? And just, and there's a lot of them. And, we're on this OGAT thing and, people come up to you at the gym and down at Costco and they say things and they're very appreciative. At the same time, I don't mind doing the work, although it's getting to be a bit much sometimes, right? But, I don't know, I would probably land where I thought you were going to land, Kevin, between 0 and 1, okay? So I'm going to land in 0.5% for basically the rationale that you outlined. Okay, which is, you have 2.5 million increase, right? The impact to Orange is dramatic in terms of, our population at Amity went down 11, but in ratio to everybody else, it didn't go down quick enough, right? So we're getting hit on a higher 0.5% of the overall, right? Which was what, John, 200,000, a little under, I think you remember that? But, for years, I feel like I've been a little bit of a lonely soldier, doing this Amity assessment pretty critically. And all I was doing is following the numbers.
I've done it very well, too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Done it
That's
very,
not
very,
what
very
I'm
well.
saying it for.
That was a great presentation, too.
But I want to at least have us, if we, what we've done in the past, right? This would mean that as a board, giving everybody an equal vote and equal share, that we would be supporting a 0.41% increase, right? 0, 0, 2, 0.5, 0, 0.
Round it to 0.5.
Okay?
Yeah.
And as you said, Kevin, we're trying to run a town here, right? Pedagogical or whatever was in that letter last year, okay? We got taxpayers and boy, I'll tell you what, we would have had a different meeting tonight, I think, on this very issue if the 1,000 point down in the Dow didn't come back in the last, 45 minutes?
Yep.
Okay? And, I mean, it
we
makes
don't need
me
that.
wonder, we are in a very volatile
We don't need that.
situation.
What's gonna happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
I know.
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm trying to emit something positive in a positive direction. And I'm not, nothing to anybody, right? But I would be willing to propose a motion that this board support an Amity budget increase up to 0.41%, which I can calculate what that number is, all right? And I will do so in a second if you guys think that that's a fair process, what I just described.
The average of everyone, I think
The
that's
average of
fair.
everybody.
Then round it to 0.5, that's all.
No, it
You're
looks.
rounding, make it easy, make it
No,
even.
I'm not making
a
it
banker,
easy,
make the
Joe,
loans easy,
because
Kev. Make
yeah,
it
it
easy.
doesn't, it doesn't smell the authenticity. It doesn't pass the authenticity test, okay, for me. I mean, that's what we did If you want me to change your number to some other number so it comes out to 0.5, that's different. I want us to be a team.
Well, here's the thing, can we get the ABOE on board with our thought process this year, this time around?
This slide that's up here now, I think, is very critical. I remember when Tom was on the board, right? They would go off and, oh, if we overspent our budget, we would be personally liable, right? And I'd be willing to do a motion right now to cover any personal liability of Amity board members. I'd even cover all the towns. It's only $2,000 a person, all right? If that's going to impact their behavior so much, to be so risk averse, because you can't deny that this is what's been going on. And you can't call it a COVID year every year. And every time you pick out another year as, well, it was a special factor that year. It wasn't a $3 million factor. No, due respect. Can have a little respect this way, you know? But we've been making decisions throughout the process. We're now making decisions when we only have December numbers, right? And yeah, it has gone down. But, you know, the hockey stick comes back. So I'm going to propose that make a motion to propose a 0.41% increase, which, Deb, I'll get for you in just a second. All right, and what that would mean in terms of the actual budget we would recommend, would support. How do I do this?
So here's a question. If the Amity budget ever went under and they needed money from the towns, of course we would provide it to them. Again, it hasn't happened, but I'm sure we could provide it to them. But we never talk about that either. It's like, if you guys were ever short, we would never leave you hanging. And it's never.
How would that even be conceptually possible?
Exactly, but I'm saying,
But you're asking a question that we shouldn't even, if our kid runs out in front of the car, are we going to protect them? Of course
I'm
we're
saying,
going
if
to.
Amity comes in at a 0% budget and they're short, and if the guys were $1 million short divided by 3 towns,
Right.
would the towns leave them high and dry? Of course not.
But I don't think it's that easy, though.
They have to go to a,
would have to vote on it.
we have to vote on it.
You'd have to go to a referendum like we did years
When
ago.
we had
Way
the
back
$2
when, yeah.
million shortage.
Yep.
We had a vote on it.
We had the special assessed to taxpayers.
And, and I'm thinking back, well, Tony was the chairman at the time, so. Yeah, 20 years ago.
22 years ago.
His statement always would
Microphone,
be,
Kev,
Oh,
microphone.
we need your mic.
oh, sorry. His statement always would be that we would cover the cost of education, because that would come up every year, that suppose they got hit with a dramatic special ed budget, increase, or all of a sudden there were a whole group of kids that went into that category. We always said we would support that. And we would back it up. That was, there was never a doubt that we would do
But
that.
that's on the Orange Board of Education side. You're
Right.
talking about Amity. You can't do that there.
Right, we would have to have a
go to
Oh, yeah, we would,
Yeah.
all 3 towns would have to have the referendum. Yes. Yes.
Which you don't want that,
And they
of
still
course.
have $1 million+ in that other account. There's emergency money there.
And remember, we give them 150 contingency every year, and there's that 1%, which I'm okay approving the 1%, the $500,000 for their capital non-recurring project. I'm okay with that, but not 2%.
Not 2%.
So that the $500,000 plus the 150, that's $650,000, $700,000. That's your contingency plan. You're good there. Plus, they're showing $2.5, $3 million surpluses. That's a problem.
All right, so Jim, the motion,
Okay, I got it right here, guys. Okay, motion for that the Orange Board of Finance would support an Amity budget for fiscal year 22-23 of $51,910,000, it's up there, Deb, 170. A 0.41% increase and the amount of the money increase is $211,963. It's right up there, Deb. Excel should be doing it right, I think.
no, that's the right number.
You feel the right number, team?
Oh, yeah, I wrote it over here, and here.
Okay. So that's my motion, based on our discussion, based on how we talked about it.
And that's a .41?
.41, that's correct.
Well, I have a question on this. If,
Well, we have to,
So we have a motion, and I need a second.
and then we can have a discussion.
Second by Ajit. All right, now, any further discussion? And Joe?
Joe.
yes, so my question is this. If we go back around the table and all come in at a 0%, does that send a stronger message to them versus a 4.1% increase?
I don't think so.
No. Because as we had off-camera, the discussion that, you know, as hard as Jim works to put that all together and to lay the facts on the table as clearly as they can ever be stated, generally it's ignored. And you
I
know,
know it is, I
it's
know.
no offense, Jim, but, you know, I
It is
think
ignored.
my
It has
experience of listening to it for these years is, it's, you know, as hard as you, as much effort is put into it, it basically just, you know, slides through. And I understand that. I mean, but we expect a certain quality level there.
We have it.
And it's been there and it always will be there. But it, you know, there's a certain amount of reasonableness, because when we got sloppy the last time, that's when you had a $2 million, that's when you had the $2 million deficit.
Well, we're coming dangerously close to being sloppy right now over the last 4 years, okay? Let's not kid ourselves. You know, it isn't, we're short 2, but we're hanging around 3 million average surplus for 4 years. You know, you can't just say the word COVID and say, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You know, it just ain't so.
All right, so we have the motion and a second. Any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, unanimous.
I think this chart, if there's one chart that, a piece of work I've done, team, it's really this one.
Bar graphs.
Well, it's not, it's that we don't have the information that this is coming, and we know it's coming,
Right.
but we act as if we don't know it's
Yeah.
coming. 'Cause-
Okay.
So that's the thing.
Item number 7, discussion and approval of minutes from December 20th, 2021, regular meeting.
John's batting lead off as always. Excuse me, team.
And we have 8 minutes.
You're never gonna do it.
Yeah, we can give it a look anyway.
Page 1, at the very bottom, let's strike out in the middle of that paragraph, the very last paragraph, where it says, which expires on December of 2024. That's not true, so easiest thing to do is just
Yes, yeah,
strike that.
yeah, that's right.
And then the last sentence, Mr. Cifarelli advised that this amount, if approved, would be about 10% higher due to workman's compensation and FICA taxes on the labor amount.
Taxes on the labor amount, add those words, okay, good, John?
On page 3 at the top, I just have to clean up this very top paragraph. Mr. Cifarelli briefly explained the defined benefit plan, which is a closed plan with 7 employees remaining in it. And then let's say Mutual of America, which is a defined contribution plan. I don't know which I'm requesting, the $12,000 for a RFP project by Fiducian Advisors. Say that.
Could you say that again? I'm so sorry. Just read it one more time.
Okay.
The second half.
Mutual of America, which maintains the defined contribution plan. The $12,000 is for RFP to look for another advisor
Okay.
through Fuduent, whatever. That's all I have, Fiducian. They changed their name so many
They
times,
changed
I
it 3
can't
times in
keep
the
it
last
up.
year. Yeah.
That's all I had.
Anyone else? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Kevin. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, unanimous? Great.
Good.
Item number 8, discuss meeting schedule for the all-day budget meeting on February 4th, 2022.
Okay, I pretty much put the schedule together based on our 2020 meeting schedule, because we didn't have our all-day meeting last year. If you want to make any changes to it, I'm all open to any suggestions.
What's the budget amount for town clerk for which we're seeing Mary Shaw?
It hasn't changed much from the previous year. I thought maybe you'd want to see both her and Tom because they're new
Okay.
employees in those positions.
So since the Confirmation Commission has a very minor piece of the budget, there must be.
She asked to see his.
Yeah, she's been asking for years.
She's-
And she did come one year
Yeah,
and brought us
2 years ago,
those booklets
Yeah.
and everything.
She-
was going on.
she
That
actually
brochure she
has
had was
a-
ridiculously
She
good.
actually has a access about 3 times their normal budget for something that needs to be done out there in the wetlands area.
Okay.
No, and that commission, they do a lot of stuff, and her husband does a lot of
Oh,
stuff.
Jimmy?
Oh, yeah.
He just builds it, fixes it, I mean,
He's MVP of a lot of
he
categories.
saved this town thousands and thousands of dollars.
Man,
The only other person I didn't put on the schedule who also has a big ask is the building department. They're asking for some scanners to be able to start scanning building plans. We have quite a mess up in the attic here where they need to keep the plans perpetually and they're just thrown in a corner. And all the cities and towns now are going to scanning so everybody could have them online. And it's probably going to become a future law that we're going to have to do it. But I think Mr. Mangillo could cover that in his.
Yeah, and that would be a
half hour that
capital
he
item
has.
anyway.
It probably would be, but it's in his current budget. We'll have to play with that.
is that in Mangillo's area code or?
He knows about it because it's a techie thing. It's
Okay, so if
with
he comes that day,
computers.
he knows he'll speak to it?
Yeah, he could speak to it.
Okay.
Everything else, Dennis Marsh is still acting community service director, so he'll be here for that. I thought we'd start off with Chief Gagney like we normally do.
Standard work.
Because they're always on time.
Oh, early.
Works for me.
Yeah. So if nobody has any problems with that, I'll send it
Well, hold
out
on,
to
we
them
have,
tomorrow.
Kevin and I have definite question.
Go ahead.
Do we bring our own box of Dunkin' Donuts, Joe, or are we relying on?
I
You know,
will-
I go over to the Amity Orange Board of Education. They're getting sandwiches.
They give us wraps.
I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
Well,
remember, you just said tonight you cut our budgets because of Amity.
Well, come on, John.
I will send you
I will.
I will send you
Kevin and I will supply it.
I will.
I will send you an email, let you know if Audrey will be able to pick it up.
Thank
But we will have the pizza for lunch, I can guarantee you.
If she does it, I'll pick it up, let me know. If she
Yeah, really.
won't get it, I'll get it.
We're not
I
going
can't-
through this without dunks.
No.
By the way, is there any way we can get a heads up from Ralph?
You got it. It's already in the book. I worked with him and I put it together per your
Is it-
normal
hold it,
schedule.
Hold it. Is it already?
It's not on, it's
Is
not
it
on that.
already
I
in
don't think-
this?
No, I didn't send it
Okay,
on
so
that, but
I'll
it's in
create
the
it
book.
while we're talking about it like I
No,
usually do.
it's just like you wanted. I used your.
Oh, you used my
I
template?
used your template
All
from
right.
last year or 2 years
Roger
ago.
that. That's what we should do, you
Sounds like
know?
why reinvent the wheel?
All
There
right,
you
so
go.
nobody has any changes?
No.
We'll go with this?
Yeah, good.
Okay, so then the next
With
one
dunks.
is our meeting dates for the budget and when we have to hit our final budgets, so we can have our public hearing and all that.
So let's get the calendar out and let's nail some of
Okay.
this stuff down. We can
So
do this.
February 4th, we start with our all-day budget. If you want to get that up, Jim.
Yep, I'll get
Probably
the,
already on here.
whoa, what happened to, oh, there it is. Okay, so we need the fast forwards thing here, Joe, keep it fair. I think I already threw it in here. Budget
Yeah, I see
finish.
it.
Yeah, here we are.
Okay, then,
So we want to, let me do this. Let me, town
John, the April 1st to the 4th is your timeline, right? That, we could go
Right.
past that if we need to.
No. Well, if you go past it, it means we gotta push the budget hearing off farther because I need 2 weeks. It needs to be published 2 weeks before the budget hearing.
I thought it
We
was,
can do some calendar planning here,
I
right?
thought it was 10 days. It's 2 weeks?
2 weeks. I think last year I didn't get it in. It was 10 days.
Kev, I got a calendar up here, and I'm trying to plug in as many of these as we can, even if we, and I'd rather plug them in and change them rather than not plug them in at all. We usually do Wednesday, Thursday, if I can do back scheduling.
Okay, that 21st, that 20th on April, the budget hearing's got to go to the 21st.
Okay,
I had to move it. The cafeteria's being used on the 20th,
roger that. I'll just put some gray ones here for us.
What day of the week is the 21st?
Thursday.
Okay.
So that gives you an extra day to rest between April 15th.
So you usually, we usually want to get this thing nailed down by the end of March, if not
March
sooner,
31st.
right? So we'll call it budget finish is one way of
And
calling
it
it.
all depends, because we've pushed it and waited as long as we can in years when we didn't know what the state was gonna do
Yeah.
with what they were cutting and stuff. Hopefully, we're okay right now. I have not heard any big changes in our, have you, Kevin?
We all got a letter last week. Did you get that letter from OPM last week?
Which one?
The one that said we weren't going to get some of our funding?
I didn't see that.
Oh, that's a
You didn't
problem.
see that? Well, we got a letter on, what was it, Martin Luther King Day, I think it was last week.
Meriden is a distressed municipality.
Yeah,
You
you're-
never get those letters.
We got a letter that
Maybe
said
you
we
get
may
to
not
that
get
4
some
million, Kevin. We
funding.
Giving you
understand.
checks.
And our treasurer said it's about $400,000 if it goes through.
So we could have a $400,000 hole.
Well, some of it may be LoSiP and some of it may be town
Town aid road.
aid.
Okay.
But those are things we use, like town aid road we use for salt.
Oh, yeah.
and So it could be a problem.
So when will we usually have OBOE.
Oh, and I did talk to Dr. Scarpetti. He would probably be ready the end of February, beginning of March.
Yeah, they usually come in almost middle of March, but if he's
Yeah.
ready earlier, that's good.
He's having a budget meeting Thursday night. They're still working on theirs.
Okay, so we did Amity over here on the 24th. You're figuring that the OBOE budget would be in the area code of early March?
Or first week of March, probably.
March 7th. It's a Monday, right?
Well, we're, that time of year, Kev, we kind of, whenever we can make them, you know, so
Yep.
here's what I'll do. I'll just stick it up here in the non-date zone, to kind of signify that it's kind of in that area for now.
Now, I do have a possible ask. Because we didn't get our audit done for January, they're working on the final stages of it. If they could get it done quickly in the beginning of February, you think we could have a night meeting for about an hour to approve that?
Sure.
It would really help me if we could get it done before the end of the month, so I could get it filed.
The end of February.
Yeah.
How about 7th?
I can't give you a date yet. They're
Oh,
still
We have to
working
talk
on
to
it.
Michelle.
Oh, okay.
When Michelle finally gets me the copy, I'll talk to Kevin and maybe we could see if we could, it could even be in the morning or on a Saturday if I could get Michelle here. Whatever you guys could do.
What I was thinking is, we've got the 28th is our next meeting?
Yeah, and that's a little late.
Yeah, and,
Yeah, February 28th, no.
Yeah.
well, I'll tell you what, we're
Because of
meeting
some-
all day on the 4th. Let's, as part of that day, revisit, well, let's just revisit this calendar and just update it as we
Yeah,
go.
it's next
How about
week.
that?
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so when I send out this document, guys, somewhere in the back of the bus is what I call,
All right, so we can
The
move
path
on
forward.
to item 9.
Yep.
is this PJ's item?
No, this is the item we're going to table because
Yes.
John says there's no major changes.
No major.
Nothing to worry about. Okay. Audit review, you mentioned,
Right.
OB&A financial report is February, so they're gonna be on the February.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
When are
all
we
good.
seeing Dr. Muhammad and his crew? We should add this to this, old business
March,
or
wasn't
next
it?
steps.
End of March?
Let's call this old
Yeah,
business
that won't
slash
be for a
next
while.
steps.
They haven't done anything yet.
And let's put down.
I
was wondering.
Whatever the
Yeah.
Dr.
The update.
Muhammad.
I haven't heard
what's that
anything.
They were
called?
gonna give us an
Supposed to come back to the
update.
end of March.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
right.
don't know what
But
the
they
pro-
were- I
we
haven't
shouldn't
heard
call
that
He was
it
supposed to
that.
start going out and hiring
Mitigation
then.
plan, I have it.
Yeah.
Have they asked for any money yet?
He hired
COVID mitigation plan.
RN.
Oh,
and I
okay.
believe she started today.
Oh, okay.
All right, so they're gonna get a clinic
Thanks, Dan.
going?
We'll see.
Okay. All right.
Now, is Dr. Muhammad up and running? I saw the front page article over in the,
He hired a RN, but I don't think he started the clinic yet.
Okay,
you may miss the Omicron wave.
and hopefully there's not another one.
Let's hope there's not another one. Let's hope fast, exactly.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Kevin, second.
Very
Second by
strong second
Kevin.
half here, Kevin.
Meeting adjourned at 10:07. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks, guys.